and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the second round of the UKSimRacing Community's GT3 League Season 9, as brought to you on the premier sim racing platform available only on PC, known as iRacing. And today, as our drivers make the way around the American asphalt, the venerable tarmac of Daytona Road Course in the state of Florida, USA, we'll be asking ourselves the question, who will be adding the notch, the crown of winner Daytona to their UKSimRacing career history across our three racing classes, of course, of the Elite, the Pros, and also the AMs. Well, we'll be joining all the action as it occurs today at circuit side as our drivers get ready to go racing in just under 14 minutes time of qualifying. But before we get to that, of course, a little bit about Daytona. This circuit being considered as one of the largest centres of motorsport in the world, indeed nicknamed the World Centre of Racing. It is a circuit that year in, year out sees the racing arrival of the IMSA Sports Car Championship with the special event of the 24 Hours of Daytona as sponsored by Rolex. But it's not just about the road course, indeed this circuit taking to its tarmac NASCAR and also IndyCar, and it is a circuit like no other where the drivers are taking on the oval or the road course. And with the road course, of course, with a mixture of the infield and also the majority of the oval section, it is a circuit of contrast. And will it be contrasting fortunes for some of our drivers? That'll be what they'll have to find out, and indeed we will observe as time rages on. But as this broadcast is being brought to you live, it is being brought to you live via YouTube on the official UKSimRacing Community YouTube channel. You can tune in by going to youtube.com and then searching for UKSimRacing or UKSR. In the commentary booth, you have myself, Paul TX141 Walsh, also known as Britain Aspect, depending on what media you follow me on, and I'll be bringing you all of your racing action over the course of the entire calendar for Season 9. And well, let's take a look at that calendar as it stands as we make our way into round number 2. Indeed, last time out, we started at Silverstone in the United Kingdom on the 8th of January in the Sprint to Remember, where we had almost 60 drivers take around the venerable tarmac of Silverstone. Indeed, I keep using the word venerable, but that's just to go to show legendary circuits absolutely populating this calendar from start to finish. And at Silverstone there, it was battles all across the field, albeit our top three in the Elite class spaced out to a degree. But meanwhile, in the Pro class, it was all about the battle for P2, and in the AM class, it was the battle to be the winner right at the front. Today, in the United States, the first of two visits to the United States over the course of the season, we're seeing our drivers once again battling to be at the front, but there'll be the added conundrum of slipstream on the oval banking, and therefore at Daytona we could expect a very different dynamic as it is the 15th of January. After this week, we'll then be making our way back to the European continent for the Monza Grand Prix circuit, now being round number 3 on the 22nd of January in our third sprint of the season, and then we'll be wrapping up the first half of the season with a visit to the French circuit, recently introduced to iRacing on Magny-Cours, and it'll be our first endurance round there on the 29th of January. We have a week's break, giving our drivers the ability to reconcile and indeed look back at what's occurred in the opening 4 rounds and get themselves mentally prepared for the next 4 rounds. And then in round number 5, we'll return on the 12th of February for the Nürburgring Grand Prix circuit. There in another sprint in the season, our 4th sprint of 6 sprints, and then we'll be continuing the story all the way down under to Australia for the Bathurst circuit, also known as Mount Panorama. And well, in that sprint, you can definitely tell the walls are going to be close. It's going to be a journey up and down the mountain by the Trove. And then in our final sprint race round of the season, round number 7, we'll be making our way over to the South American continent for the Interlagos circuit in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And well, what better circuit to visit one round before the end, given that the Interlagos circuit is synonymous with championship drama, whether it be in Brazilian touring car more recently, alternatively in past years of Formula 1, and that will be on the 26th of February. And then our season finale will be back in the United States of America as we make our way around the Sebring circuit, the endurance round there to wrap it all up, and that will be on the 5th of March in round number 8 in a good number of weeks' time. But of course, before we get to those final rounds, we must progress to the first half of the calendar, and let's focus on our circuit for today. We start off then today at the Daytona International Speedway Road Course, as we mentioned previously. But what about a little bit more in regards to this circuit located at the Daytona Beach site in Florida, the United States of America? Will consist of 12 corners, as you can see from the circuit map provided to us by iRacing.com. Thank you to them for the circuit maps available in the simulator. This is a circuit which blends oval and infield together like no other, because our drivers make the way across the start-finish line where the oval start-finish line is as well. They'll make the way into the drop into turn number 1, a long elongated trail 12 braking zone, which takes them into the infield region. Going through the long left-hander, they'll have to balance the throttle on corner exit to make sure they don't receive any understeer or oversteer or a mix of the two, and bring it all together in the run-through kinks of 2 and 3, and then head into turn number 4. The horseshoe hairpin, as it's known, as they break the way into the first of 2 infield hairpins. They'll come out of turn number 4, a very wide exit of 4, and charge their way through the kink of 5, completely flat out in these GT3 machines, before breaking into the second hairpin at turn number 6. At turn 6, it's a little bit more condensed, and whoever's ahead in the run-up towards turn number 7, well, they need to get a good launch out of turn 7 before they return to the oval, where the circuit opens up once again, and we head back to the traditional NASCAR circuit. Making their way onto turn 8 banking, they'll come all the way round and head down the back straight in towards the bus stop chicane at turns 9, 10, 11. While drivers will go left, right, left as they make the way on out, and as they come roaring on through the left, right, left combination, they'll see on the exit it's all about the run through the bank of 12 and onto the start finish line to do it all over again. And we'll be seeing our highest top speed to reach over the course of the season here, given the run all the way round from turn number 11 at the end of the bus stop into turn number 1. Indeed, in the slipstream, we could be seeing upwards of 170 miles an hour. But as we look from our circuit map, we look to our rules for today, and no rule changes. Let's just give you a quick reminder of the rules for this series. In terms of car setup, this is an open setup series. There are no fixed setups in application. The only fixture on the setups is that car fuel loads have been restricted to 45% for all races, and that means they've just got enough fuel to get to the end of the race unscathed in the sprint, but in the endurance races that will mandate a fuel pit stop. In qualifying, lone qualifying format shall be used, which means all of our drivers have their own instance of the circuit, which they take to in order to set their qualifying laps, and every driver will have 4 fast laps or 15 minutes in total, whichever one is breached first, to set their best possible time. In the sprint race, the race shall commence via double file rolling start. There are no mandatory pit stop requirements. If a driver comes into the pits, it'll be likely to be for repairs, and there'll be no fast repairs available. So when you have to come into the pits, you will have to wait the long time. Indeed, the mechanics have not had that instant coffee, which means they work incredibly fast. They'll be working at the standard rate. And then for our final point there, a driver shall receive a drive-through penalty if they accumulate 17 or more instant points. And indeed, we're not expecting too many instants here, but you never know what can happen, and there may be a little bit of bump drafting on the straights and coming out to the oval, and that may just lead to some instants being picked up. Enough rules and regulations. I know what you're all here for. We're here for the racing, and well, let's head back to our live pictures here as we see Si Anthony parked up circuit side there, and let's bring up our schedule for today. Times in Greenwich Mean Time, that's GMT, or Universal Coordinated Time, UTC. They are as follows. In just under 8 minutes time now, we'll be heading into our qualifying session that kicks off at 8 o'clock this evening, 15 minutes in length, and of course all our drivers taking to the lone version of the circuit for themselves, spending their best possible laps and set themselves up on the grid for our one and only sprint race today, and that will kick off at 8:15 with the grid walk, and we'll be making our way on down the grid before getting ready to go. Green lights away for 45 minutes of racing action here, and well, indeed it is going to be an intense one. And who's going to be getting pole, and will pole be that important given the run into turn number 1? Well, we'll just have to wait and find out. But that is our schedule. In terms of track and ambient temperature right now, we are looking at 22 degrees centigrade, which is not too bad. It's relatively cool compared to what it can be in the Floridian sunshine, but still it is nighttime right now, so we do have a reasonable ambient temperature, and that may just be preying on the minds of some of our drivers. But the majority of our drivers right now are in the pit lane, getting themselves all clocked in with regards to the driver's briefing, and whilst our blimp camera makes its way on around, we can't quite see all of our drivers at the moment, but as we try to flick the camera on round, well, not quite good there. Our cameramen not in the best places to see all our drivers parked in the pit lane at the moment. Indeed, the sponsors here will be very grateful to see all of the different logos on the sides of the cars, but as we see Ryan Davis there for Tiki Simsport car Marte parked up, and indeed just behind him there, a driver running the Cookie Monster on the side of the car by looks of things in the number 14 car, and we'll try to discern who that is in particular very shortly, and I believe that is Thomas Barjak, who we can see there in the privateer Cookie Monster Ferrari. Well, what cars are we expecting to be potentially strong here? Well, if we have to do it based on practice pace so far, well, drivers in their final practice warm-up session, it does look to be a close blend of the Audi and the Ferrari going strong here at the very top, the top three, and we can see Damian Lobbett there, current provisional fastest driver in this practice session on a 43.123 by almost 3 tenths over Daniel Lee. But of course, we saw Daniel Lee and Lobbett go toe-to-toe last time at Silverstone, but it was Daniel Thomas who walked away with the lion's share of the points, with Lobbett just behind and then Lee in third place. But you'll recall that when we spoke to Daniel Lee in the post-round interview, he said that he thought it'd be a different complexion at Daytona, given the fact the Ferrari wasn't quite as strong compared to the Audi at Silverstone, and is expecting that the Ferrari may just have the legs to be able to take the change to the Audis. Well, speaking of Audis, we also look to the Audi R8 here of Joe Newman from SimRacing Red, and we do need to point out here that SimRacing have changed their team designation for the remainder of the series going into round number 2. You'll remember that last time out they had a single outfit racing in this series, and that was SimRacing. Racing. Well, now they've been split into 2 teams. We have SimRacing Red, and that is going to consist of Joe Newman and also fellow driver, as we just double check and make sure we get the right name here, and that is also Sam Congreve who'll be racing for the red outfit, and then for the blue outfit we will have the combination of the 2 Nathans, Nathan Scott and Nathan Foster, who'll be running for SimRacing Blue. And as we do look to Nathan Foster making his way on down here towards turn number 6 with the Kingston 5 in the number 52 car here, you'll be able to note the 2 teams, of course, through the fact that the red team do have the red coloration on the car, and then the blue team do have the blue colour variation on the car. But also we do have to clarify one other thing, a bit of a mistake that occurred in the round 1 broadcast. Indeed, there were a few scratched heads and confused minds with regards to the results in round number 1, and we did have clarification after the broadcast last time out. Some of you may recall that there was the announcement with regards to our pro winner that it was Dean Powell who took the win in race number 1 at Silverstone in the pro class. Well, that was incorrect. It was the case, in fact, that it was not Dean Powell who took the win, because he was in the elite class as of the start of the season, and that's where he currently remains. And in fact, it was instead Nathan Scott who took the win in the pro class. And well, we just wanted to clarify up there because there was a little bit of discrepancy with regards to the finishing results compared to what we saw on our screens, and that has been clarified there. So if you're wondering, Dean Powell is an elite driver, not a pro driver. He's gone a step up in terms of class compared to where we thought he was, and the winner of Silverstone in the pro class was Nathan Scott. But otherwise, everything has been corrected and double checked as of the time of us going live with this broadcast, so that if there are any other errors, we'll get those resolved after today. But speaking of errors right now, nobody will want to make a single error today at the Daytona Road Course, for the simple reason it is going to be one of those ones as well where if you fall out of the pack, you may just end up falling out of the hunt for a potential win. But then again, there being 45 minutes of racing and battling being so costly as we saw at Silverstone, it definitely will be here today as well. He'll be able to resist the urge of battling hard from corner to corner, particularly in that infield section and even in the run to the bus stop chicane, where you want to have that fast and fine flow through up the 3 corners. Well, as we wait for our drivers to get underway with just under 4 minutes to go, we do look to the YouTube chat and say hello there to BRM Sim Racing, who says good evening, Paul, and good evening all. Good luck for the drivers and teams. And that's very kind of you, BRM. I hope you're doing well. And also we say hello there to JD Callahan saying let's go Tiki, and that's in reference to the 5 Tiki Motorsport teams that are racing in this series. And no, I haven't miscounted there. We do have 5 different teams of Tiki SimSport racing in this series, which is absolutely brilliant to see. And well, we do say hello there to the Tiki fan and JD Callahan. But if you are tuning in right now on YouTube and you do have the chat available, and don't be shy, feel free to say hi. I'm always happy to welcome newcomers here. And if you don't want to say hi, you can't do so. I hope you're having a great weekend. Of course, it is Sunday and we clock round to another week of work as of tomorrow. But before we get to work, we've got plenty full of brilliant racing action to come here at Daytona as we wait to get underway. And well, as all of our drivers have the itch, most of them have been released out the pit lane now, having had their drivers briefing from series organiser Simon Anthony. One of the drivers out of the circuit, you'll be seen running as a privateer in the elite class. He'll be in the Symphony Esports colours, but he is representing as a privateer. He's not in the official Symphony Esports team registered within this series, albeit he is a Symphony Esports driver in other series. But as we look to Chris Eddersford here for UKSimRacing, the Triple 8 driver, of course having a reasonable run at Silverstone last time out, but looking to take it up a further step when he takes the tarmac here today to see if he can get onto that podium for the pro drivers. Now, we should just remind you, if you're wondering who's elite, who's pro and who's am, we'll be able to look to the door numbers and also the banners over the front windshield of the car, but more easily you can also look to the timing tower on the left hand side of your screen, and you'll see that we do have drivers who are highlighted with a yellow sash against them, and those are your elite drivers. So an example of that would be Ryan Davies here for Tiki SimSport Car Marte in the 85 Lamborghini Huracan Evo, as he makes his way around there through the banking of what is turn number 8 as he comes down towards the bus stop chicane. So he's one of the elite drivers, and if you're looking for pros, they are highlighted in blue in terms of the sash that's against their name. And for example, we do have Tom Farr here also in what is the Lamborghini Huracan Evo as the privateer makes his way down towards the bus stop. And if you're looking for the AMs, well, they do have the green sash against their name, and the example would be Matt Maddox here from BDM Racing as he makes his way across the timeline and down towards turn number 1. As he comes onto the brakes here, of course, right now he'll be looking to have a good result, good start to his season, and it has been looking very close at Silverstone with regards to our AM drivers. Really a multitude of drivers in it to potentially get on that podium, but as they come on around here through Daytona, very different circuits we'll tell you about in qualifying in terms of the characteristics of the circuit, and that may just catch a driver or two out in terms of that transition from being a high downforce circuit to a circuit here when it really comes down to driver preference, how much downforce in terms of rear wing you run and the comfort you feel inside the car, because the more rear wing you run and therefore the more downforce, you'll be more comfortable in the infield section in terms of the ability to take speed from corner to corner. But then when you go onto the oval bank and the run down towards the bus stop chicane, you'll really feel as though you're being penalised in terms of top end speed. Conversely, run less rear wing and it goes the other way. But speaking of things going a certain way, if you've ever thought about how you can go out of your way to be able to support UKSimRacing, you've been a long time enjoyer, whether on circuit with us or you just tune into the broadcast week in, week out, did you know that you're able to support UKSimRacing by a very quick way, and that is through our affiliates? For we at UKSimRacing are affiliated with multiple sim racing and real world motorsport companies, including Swellio and Meta Sim Racing Coaching, Race Anywhere and Demon Tweaks. And if you head to our website, which will be on screen very shortly, our website being uksimracing.co.uk today, well, on our website, as you can see it here, albeit the button's slightly off screen on the left hand side, there is a button there for discount stroke affiliates, and if you do click on that button, you'll be redirected to the following page here, where you have the logos of all of our different affiliates, and if you click on any of those logos, you'll be taken to a page where you can make purchases through them, which result in discounts for you as the consumer and a kickback to us. And in turn, as UKSimRacing is a non-profit organisation, all of our affiliate earnings shall be invested back into the community to fund future series, and additionally, some of our affiliates provide discount codes which are available in the UKSimRacing Discord. So if you're not part of it already, but if you're ever thinking about joining any of our series, it is a requirement to be part of the Discord. But if you're not a part of the UKSimRacing Discord, then why not join it? Because you can capitalise on some affiliate codes. Remember, a little purchase can go a long way in supporting UKSimRacing. But as we now look from our affiliates, we come back to the live pictures at the circuit, and all our drivers now starting to make the way out here for the qualifying session as we look to Hakon Gustave here as he makes his way into turn number 4, rolling his way on through. And as he comes on out here in the McLaren MP4 12C. Well, the McLaren, of course, in the fingertips of Gustave, did very well last time at Silverstone, within the top 5, at the bottom end of the top 5, but still fighting hard all the way through. And as he heads on down towards turn number 6 right now, coming on through the right hand here, of course, looking for a bit of tyre temperature. And let's just give you an update on that weather. As you can see, the weather track on the right hand side of your screen there. And with the local time coming up to close to what is 7 o'clock in the evening, we've got quite a little bit of a gust now of approximately 6 to 7 miles an hour wind, but more importantly, that ambient and track temperature both holding around 22 degrees centigrade still, and that goes to show you that whilst it is at night time here, we do have a relatively high temperature at night, and that's going to mean those tyres do come up to temperature quite quickly, albeit the tyre wear rate's not going to be too high compared to if it was 30 plus degrees centigrade. You imagine our drivers here will not look to cook the tyres too hard with a revised tyre model for GT3s on iRacing that was introduced just before Christmas. But as we see Gustave making his way on through, and we do hide the weather off the screen there, so it's not to take up the furniture space, we do see Gustave making his way across the bus stop chicane and onwards towards turn number 12. And as he comes roaring on through, we'll very shortly be riding on board with him for his opening flying lap of this qualifying session as he comes on around and give you a feel of what it's like to attack the Daytona Road Course in the McLaren MP4 12C. As he heads on down and towards turn number 1 then, we bring the dashboard up in the bottom right corner of your screen, and here he goes, he crosses the timeline. He's making his way down towards turn number 1 and on to the brakes immediately here, coming all the way down the gearbox and into second gear and bringing it to the apex before powering out. Now making his way through corners 2 and 3 here, flat out all the way as he connects the 2 apexes and now heads down towards turn number 4 into the horseshoe hairpin. Braking down to first gear here, the lowest speed corner on the circuit, powering out there at 50 miles an hour on the apex and heading up towards turn number 5. He'll bring the car gradually over to the right hand side here, full commitment, no lift off here as he accelerates through the gearbox up to 5th, through the kink of 5 and now over to the left hand side to break into turn number 6. Second hairpin, but you'll notice as he brakes in, he points the car, but it's a little bit of a lift and drift there as he sets the car back, and that's cold tyre temperature just exposed him a little bit there with regards to the downshifts. A very aggressive set of downshifts, but that is his first lap aborted. So instead we do look to other drivers, and well, we will suspend run on board for a brief while here as we see Edward Knight on the timing tower there, continuing to improve a little bit on the timing line at the bottom of your screen, but he's just gone onto a fly. But we're focusing here on Ben Watkinson as he comes on around, and as he makes his way on through, well, a lot of our drivers still were waiting to see them get a time on the board here, and well, who's going to be the driver who can get their first time on the board? That will be the big question that we are waiting the answer to as they make the way on around. But as Watkinson comes on through, we also do look to Simon Hartley, fellow AM driver here, as he heads down into turn number 1 for the first time in angering qualifying as he goes into his first flying lap. And some drivers decide to delay their first flying laps and really taking as much time as they can to get that tyre temperature in on their outlap, for the simple reason I think they're all feeling the pinch when it comes to getting tyre temperature early on. And as he makes his way on through turn number 4, we do look from Chris to AM driver Daniel Pays here. And, well, we do have some of our very first times coming on through. Pays making his way on down right now as we see that Matthew Crisp takes the maiden time on the board, but more times now starting to flow on in here, and I think those times are going to very quickly evolve, and we're expecting low 43s as a minimum here for the pole lap, but I wonder if we'll see any 42s as well. As we see coming across the line there, that is Daniel Pays. He crossed the line, he goes P14, and as he rolls his way on through turn number 1, now he'll go a lot more aggressively into the opening corners here, so now it feels like the car is completely dialed in and he can go all in on the brakes. As he comes down to turn number 4 here, with almost a third of this qualifying session already complete. Well, the times are still populated as Martin Tillian and Daniel Thomas both come into the pits. They've decided to return to the pits and go back out there for another run, rather than just staying out there on their current set of tyres and current fuel load that will be draining on down. And it is very interesting to see how some drivers are taking different approaches in qualifying. We saw at Silverstone, of course, some drivers opt to run the entire qualifying session, so all 4 laps, plus also their out lap on that single tank of fuel and single set of tyres, whereas other drivers decide after each lap they set to make their way back into the pit lane and then go again, of course giving them less time effectively on over on circuit, but in return going out there with a car that's as light as possible for every single lap. Because the danger space you play into there is you have less time to really get those tyres in the zone, so you have to really push cold tyres on an out lap, and then you have to make sure that you can push those tyres even more on that fast lap before going back to the pits and doing it again. Whereas if you're spending a whole sequence of laps, if the out lap is not perfect and getting the tyres up to temperature, you can then play with a banker lap for your first lap, and then your second lap becomes closer to your optimum, and then your third and fourth lap are really up there, so long as you have not squandered the rubber under your heels. But meanwhile, as we see Daniel Merchant making the way towards the timeline, currently P16. Will it be this time as he comes on through? P4 in the pros as he makes way to the line, does not improve from a 44.619 there versus previously at 44.48 as he comes on through. But as he makes his way on down, we look to Paul Smith, the fastest man in the pro class here, as he comes across the line for Ignite Motorsport and heads on down. And well, does he improve? He does to P8. There he jumps on up on a 44.036, and Smith definitely raising the bar here. And can any of the pros respond? That is the big question as he makes his way through 2, 3 and up into 4. Well, speaking of responses here, we do wait to see if one of our other drivers can respond in the pro class, and well, we see Edward Knight making his way up towards the timeline, fellow Ignite Motorsport driver. And what's it going to be this time around? He is currently P6 in class, P20 overall. He crosses the line, and well, is it improvement? It is. It jumps in right up there with Smith as we switch up the standings to show you the top 10 of each class now in this qualifying session. We've reached the effective halfway point a little bit before 7.5 minutes, but a lot of drivers now have already put at least 2 laps in terms of 2 flying laps. But right now Ignite Motorsport are dominating in the pro class. It's Smith ahead of Knight and Boschov, all 3 of them across the Ignite Motorsport and Ignite Motorsport Spark teams. And well, can they bring this on home in the pro class in qualifying? That'll give them a huge momentum and motivation boost going into the race itself. But meanwhile, we do look up to our elites, and here is Daniel Thomas right now, and look at the elite class by comparison there. You're not losing your mind, your marbles have not gone crazy, and also to that, your eyesight is working perfectly fine when you look at those times and you see, yes, Congreve is on pole for 43.803, but between him and Newman in P6, it's less than a 10. That is not a deception, that is the truth of it, and that shows you how fast they are. And well, it continues to look as though in the elite class, the Audi is really the car that's on the march. But meanwhile, one driver who's really bucking the trend, it is Martin Tillian here as he makes his way through the chicane, through the bus stop chicane, and right now only 6 thousandths of a Congreve. Could we see Tillian stem the tide of the Audi R8 dominance in the qualifying session for our elite drivers? And meanwhile, in the other classes, we have got an array of cars. It does seem to be Lamborghini Huracan Evo dominance at the top of the pro class, with Edo 7 P4 and the BMW M4, and then Gaines in P6 in the M4. And meanwhile, in the AM class, we have a Porsche on provisional pole in the form of Rosina, but meanwhile, Cal Kuselis then goes on to pole in the Porsche as well. So it is a multitude of manufacturers doing well across the classes. But meanwhile, we were spoiled a little bit earlier with regards to not quite having a full lap from our driver who we rode on board with on Hakon Gestad. But as we look to Ryan Gonzalez here, we will very shortly be getting another on-board lap with one of our drivers as their qualifying session continues. And right now, Gonzalez in the Tiki SimSport machine making his way out of turn number 4 and up towards 6 he goes. P8 at the moment, but we know the BMW M4 based on its current balance of performance, is a bit more of a race car rather than the qualifying car. What it lacks in one lap pace, it makes up for in terms of overall stability under race conditions. So this is the car that you're very unlikely to get it wrong in terms of the car comes and bites you back. Meanwhile, by comparison, when you look to the likes of the Audi R8 and also the McLaren MP412C, they're at the other end of the spectrum in terms of the very sharp cars, and when you don't quite find that balance of perfection, then the car very quickly lets you know about it. As you see Gonzalez making his way onto the oval at banking of 8, but as he makes his way on through and down towards the bus stop chicane, we will be very shortly having some more of our drivers come on through, including Ryan Moles here in the Audi R8 coming around, and he's only on his second lap at the moment, so we're going to jump on board with the elite driver here for a lap from his perspective as he makes his way down towards turn number 1. So heading into the braking zone here from 175 miles an hour, trail braking all the way down the gearbox, late apex, and catches it perfectly as he powers on out of turn number 1 and now through 2, 3 and up towards 4 there. That was as smooth as butter, that trail braking into turn 1, and as he comes down the gearbox to second gear, now powers out to turn number 4, makes his way with the runoff space there and heads up towards turn number 6. Now of course we've sung his brave as this is so far, and as he makes his way up towards turn number 6 here, can he continue to do well as he breaks his way into the second hairpin, goes as late as possible there, about 90 metres from corner apex, brings it on through as we hear we've got a new overall and what is a lead pole sitter of Josh Fletcher with 43.634, and as we see here Moles making his way into turn number 7. Notice how 7 opens up really dramatically when you get beyond that apex as you return to the oval, and therefore you've got to be bold, get back on the power as early as possible and use all the space to your advantage as you make your way onto the oval bank at turn number 8. Now powering his way on through here, it's completely straightforward in terms of the run to the bus stop chicane, but now it's all about positioning and how well you can get the car to stop in time. He'll look to his right hand side, he'll look for his brake markers, there'll be boards just above him, and as he gets ready to go on in here, breaking down from 6th gear to 4th, brings it in, connects turns 10 and 11 together as he exits out, and as he makes his way out of 11, absolutely precise manoeuvring as he heads onto the bank of turn number 12 here. To be honest with you, it looks as though he doesn't even need to slow down, but he did have to shave off speed for the bus stop chicane, but that's how smooth they can make it on through. In all these GT3 class cars, when it hooks up, he makes his way to a line, he drops slightly below the yellow line there, which is permitted, and we'll clarify the yellow line racing rule very shortly, but as he comes to the timeline, what's it going to be for Moles? He comes on through, he was on a fly and he jumps up to P4 with a 43.809, and that was a beautiful lap to ride on board with. Moles really showing us how it's done there, as that's P4 overall as well as in the elite class. Now, for those of you wondering with regards to the yellow line at the bottom of the oval, are our drivers allowed to race on it? They are, however, they are not permitted, and they're only allowed to race on it on the flat tarmac, so as they make the way down towards the bus stop chicane and also the run towards turn number 1. But also, if they find themselves below the yellow line, they may not force themselves back onto the circuit if they're below the yellow line. They must give priority to the drivers who are above the yellow line. That is the rule that has been set as of today, and therefore they make sure anybody who goes below the yellow line is not able to essentially force their way upwards onto the circuit. As you can imagine, that would be a bit of a catastrophe for everybody involved if contact were to be made. But we're coming towards the end of qualifying now, 3 minutes left on the clock, but for a lot of our drivers, they've already done their 4 laps, and so far in the elite class, it is Josh Fletcher who is currently a provisional pole sitter on a 43.634. He's also overall pole sitter, and then in the pro class, it is currently Paul Smith, the Ignition Motorsport driver, down to 44.036, and then only 3/10 behind that is Kukalus, as we can see there on a 44.356. The Porsche driver there absolutely flying strong. We're an advantage of just over a 10th over Brezina, and right now it is very close in all the classes, and well, the most impressive in terms of gaps in the classes, it could be argued, would be in the pro class in terms of how close it is between the top two of Smith and Knight, as meanwhile Ryan Davies has completed his qualifying session. We just had confirmation, and Sam Sherwood now is the only driver making his way on around. In fact, we've got one other driver coming through as well, so I have to correct myself there, and that is the driver here of what is Ollie Pimley making his way across the timeline. He's got one more lap to go here as he comes on through, and we're going to observe his lap all the way to the finish as he makes way out turn number 1, a little bit sideways there, making his way off of the turn 1 apex. They're trying to get the power down. The Ferrari driver, they're not in a comfortable space, it would seem. We also do have Peter Cox, who's yet to get a lap on the board, in fact, and Cox heading around now to complete complete his session, so we won't quite focus all the time on Pimley as he comes on through. And what's Petercock's going to be able to achieve here, given the fact he's so far down in terms of number of laps accrued that have been valid when then he puts the lap at its P5 in the Pro class, and he's left it all to last moment, but it's a good lap from Petercock. And now only one driver's left down circuit, it's Ollie Pimley, currently P14 in the Pro class, P38 overall, as he makes his way through turn number 7 and up towards 8 here. But this has not been a strong lap from Pimley on the first half at the infield section. He's been down in all 3 subsectors. He's only got 2 more subsectors to go. It's the run on the bank of 8 down towards the bus stop chicane, and it's the run through the chicane all the way to the timeline, as we continue to see that our timing tower updated and refreshed every so often. But 1 minute to go, and Pimley will get this lap in time unless he makes an error. But it does look as though here Ollie Pimley is going to be one of our lower place drivers in the Pro class today. Now, in terms of number of drivers we have in attendance, we have a grand total of 50 here in attendance at the Daytona circuit as they make their way on around in the qualifying session, and we are expecting all our drivers to take to the grid. And as Pimley makes his way on out of the final corner, final major corner that is, and now heading onto the banker, we're just getting a refresh there of our overlay to make sure we're not missing anybody. And as Pimley comes down to the timeline for what is his final lap, what's it going to be here? He's got 44.94 personal best so far. He crosses the line and it's a 45.21, not an improvement from Ollie Pimley, and that is qualifying complete, ladies and gentlemen. Overall pole and elite pole goes to Josh Fletcher. For in the Pro class it is Paul Smith, and then we can see in what is the AM class there, it is Kulis, as we can see the Porsche driver there taking pole position by just over a 10th over Frazina. But 3 different manufacturers taking pole in each of the 3 classes: an Audi in the elite, Lambo in the Pro, and then in the AMs it is a Porsche, as we get ready to go to the grid. So this is how they line up then for round number 2 of 8 in the GT3 League Season 9, as brought to you by UKSimRacing. On pole, it is Josh Fletcher, joined on the front row by SimRacing Red's Joe Newman, followed up by fellow teammate Sam Congreve there. It starts off the second row with Daniel Thomas from ProTech Motorsport alongside. On row 3, it's Ryan Moles and Martin Tillin, with Stephen Masters and Cy Anti on row number 4, and Hackle Gustad and Nathan Foster complete the top 10. We then have our pro pole sitter of Paul Smith there, P11, started off our 6th row for Ignium Motorsport, joined by Damian Lobbett for Silver Esports Black from the elite class, and behind them on row number 7 it is Edward Knight, who is joined by Sean Valandia, followed up on the 8th row by Matthew Crisp and Daniel Lee, and then we have Ryan Davies and Sam Sherwood on row 9 before Joshua Pratt and Jaco Boshoff there on row number 10 completed the top 20. John Eddowes P21 for Tiki Simsport Kimmy, joined by Peter Cox from UKSimRacing P22 on the 11th row, and then we have our AM pole sitter of Adrian Kouslas, as we can see the privateer there out qualifying Jeff Griffiths to the 12th row of the grid. Jeff Griffiths P24, and as we go to row number 13, Alex Gaines and Nathan Scott with Daniel Merchant and Eden Frazina on the 14th row, and then Richard Curie and Joel Amos on the 15th row completing the top 30. Brock Freights and Michael Warrington on row number 16, followed up by Darren Sharples and Mark Collicott, and then further behind them on row number 18 James Connolly and Chris Eddersford, followed up by the pairing on row number 19 of what is Martin Fernie and Ollie Pimley, and then Frank Klein and Casper Rotner complete the top 40. On row 21 it's Dion Wren and Mark Johnson, followed by Tom Farr and Brian Gonzalez, and then on row number 23 Matt Maddox and Colin Patterson, and on the penultimate row Daniel Pays and Ben Watkinson, and on our final row P49 and P50 it's Simon Hartley and Thomas Barjak. But as I try to get ready to go, that's the back of the grid. We look all the way out towards the front of the grid. The pace cars are about to pull away, and we're almost ready to go racing here, as our drivers will have a short formation lap. They will not have the full formation lap, and will, as they get underway, for all the drivers, who is going to be able to pull off the ultimate result. And you would think that Joshua Fletcher will have a pole lap in the end that separates himself from the rest of the field by a couple of attempts. It may be enough to guarantee him safety into turn number 1. Well, he will dictate the pace, and as he comes around through the bus stop chicane, we wait for the green. Safety car heads through the banking of turn number 12. It's not quite peeled off yet, but Fletcher will be bringing the field together, and we keep a track in the bottom right for when he decides to go. He'll go any moment now as the safety car peels away. And it's lights out and away we go as Joshua Fletcher gets it going for Daytona in round number 2 as they come across the line and head down towards turn number 1 in the first time in anger. And head on down here, you'll notice immediately Newman and Congreve together there covering off Thomas as they make their way into the braking zone. Further back, it's side by side throughout the field as they all make the way on in. A couple of drivers there going deep on cold brakes, but everyone seemingly is surviving turn number 1 so far as they all come on through the left-hander and make the way up towards turns 2, 3 and 4. Further back, we can see up there that Ben Watkins and Thomas Barshak have gained on Simon Hartley. Meanwhile, Brock Freites has started from the pit lane as we're to understand it as he leaves the pit lane right now. But meanwhile, a little bit further up front, we can see Cy Anti there already battling versus what is Martin Tillin and Nathan Foster as he gets clear and now makes his way down towards turn number 6. But meanwhile, hot on the brakes behind Damian Lobbett there, wasting no time in trying to make ground. Almost a bit of contact there from Gustad, who gets close under braking. And behind them, meanwhile, we have Daniel Lee, who's trying to harass the back of Paul Smith, your pro leader Smith, as he breaks over. We've got a car off there, and that is Jakob Boshoff off on the green in the distance. We're not quite sure what's happened to Boshoff. We've got a car going very deep there, and that is Joshua Pratt, I think, has missed his apex as they make the way on through. And the TT Sport Tower driver, they're getting it wrong as they make the way to the oval banking now at turn number 8. But coming on through here, we look a little bit further back to Nathan Scott, who's in the battle with your AM leader Kukusalis as they make the way down towards the bus stop chicane. Scott's going low, meanwhile Kukusalis is going high. Who's going to back out first here? You'd imagine that Scott's going to have the overspeed here with the Porsche, not known for its top speed, more known for its handling as they make the way down towards the chicane. And will they both there settle into formation? But further back, we do see that Mark Johnson making a move there on what is in fact losing the position, we should say, on Matt Maddox, who makes the move on the inside. And that was for P7 in the AM class as they head on through and up into the turn 12 banking. But coming on through here, plenty of time to go, of course. And right now, all the drivers trying to settle themselves down into a formation as they rip roar and tear onto lap number 2 very shortly. But meanwhile, up front, Joshua Fletcher continues to lead overall and in the elite class here by a margin of 4 tenths over Joe Newman as he comes into turn number 1 once again and looking comfortable so far as they head on down and around and up towards turn number 4. But come roaring on through here, a bit further back, we can see that Fresina battling there with what is his rival Oliver Gaines, and Gaines there, of course, in the pro class, being given a little bit of an elbow out, and Kukusalis, in fact, has just lost the lead as a result of that in the AM class as Rosina gains, and now Daniel Merchant tries to get in the way of the AM driver as he wants to get on through, and Kukusalis is the obscured Porsche there as they make the way out of 4 and down towards 6, and this is not the way the American wants it goes. It's further contact there with Merchant, and as they come through, Kukusalis backs off the throttle there and decides he doesn't want to be involved anymore. I think that's a very sensible decision as we bring out the battle box to the bottom right. We've got a car off there, spearing off onto the grass, and we're trying to understand who that is. I believe, unless I'm very much mistaken, that is what is Matthew Crisp, who's had an off track, and it's all gone very, very wrong for Crisp very quickly early on in this race, but he can get back into it, of course, much like Boshoff can a little bit later on. They've just got to get their heads down and crack back on with it as they make the way on through, but Crisp losing dearly as meanwhile we look a little bit further from Kukusalis backwards down the field to Darren Sharples, and Sharples, of course, right up there at Silverstone for the win in the AM class, lost out in the end, but as they make the way down towards the bus stop chicane, the privateer here right now having to blend himself into the formation as Edison on his inside there, the pro driver cuts him through on the inside, and Sharples just waits his turn as they make the way through. Meanwhile, into the pit lane, we do have Klein, I believe that is a glitch on our timing tower because Klein was not leading in what is the AM class at the time of him coming to the pit lane, so we will get an updated version of our timing tower very shortly, but Fresina is still your AM leader to clarify as we continue to see our drivers making the way on through. But right now Sharples trying to make the move with Warrington now looking to go round, and the TE Simsport car Marte driver heading up the high as they make the way in towards turn number 1 once again. As they come through here, you can just see how that Lamborghini has got so much straight line punch. Meanwhile, further back, we see Matt Maddox here battling with Ben Watkinson and Simon Hartley, and it's Hartley who's side by side with Maddox. Maddox low on the inside, Hartley backing out there as they come through. Meanwhile, trying to go all the way around the outside. That's Boshoff going very, very deep and almost makes it count there as Indian Motorsport Spark driver from South Africa having to make up all those places he lost on the opening lap with the spin at turn number 6. But right now, he is not holding anything back as meanwhile Mark Kolokov battling side by side with Dean Wren, and of course all these drivers in the pro class here, these three, all battling for track position. As they make the way up towards turn number 6 right now. Boshoff already clearing as Kolokov batting side by side but going around the outside of Wren to make it on the inside into turn number 6. So that move looks to be said and done for now. But Wren will try and come back, of course, when they make the way onto the oval banking. But meanwhile, we look from them all the way back up to your race leader right now. And that's in the elite class here of Fletcher as he makes his way down into turn number 9. And as he roars his way on through, coming on through the bus stop chicane there, we see in the YouTube chat what is Dan Blackwell saying that Racing pile up turn 1. Well, that wasn't to happen in the end. Instead, right now, Racing have got Joe Newman P2, the Racing Red driver, trying to hunt down Fletcher with his teammate Congreve just behind, and he's very close at the moment. But of course, the big gambit he's got to play here is, does he decide to go for fuel saving over track position? Now, what do we mean by that? Well, now as we start to settle down a little bit in the race, and we've seen those opening moves, we're 5 minutes out of the 45 in, now our drivers have to start to think about, do they run close behind, lift and coast on the straights and into the braking zones, or do they decide to try and fight for position and make an early break? And of course, we are expecting there to be a pit stop from all our drivers. It's not mandated, of course, but the 45% fuel tank will require them to come on in at some point, unless they're doing a huge amount of fuel saving somehow. But that's going to be on the minds of so many drivers here. Have they gained enough in the opening 5 to 6 minutes to warrant moving up? But we've got a drive going very deep there, and that is, I believe, Daniel Merchant, who goes all in versus Peter Cox, and the privateer there from France does an absolutely daring move to the inside, and Cox sees it coming in the end. I think Scott just ahead may have been looking at his rearview mirrors and thinking, don't touch my rear. But meanwhile, Merchant then goes onto the grass slightly, but he just catches it as they come out of 5 and into 6. Behind Brezina, your AM leader is now being made to go deep as a result, and Alex Gaines once again having to make a mountain of a race here in terms of going through the field. He qualified P9 in class. He's gained no places. He's in fact lost a place. In fact, he started P7 in class, we should clarify, and he's dropped down to P8 in class as we get an update on his position on the grid. And as he makes way around right now, you'll remember he started P10 in the pro class at Silverstone and made his way into P2. Is he going to pull off another brilliant effort here today? Well, right now he finds himself stuck behind the two AM leaders of Brezina, and more importantly close to him at Kukusalis, as they make the way down to the bus stop chicane, and there seems to be no way through it this time for the Frenchman as he comes on through once again. Meanwhile, further back, we can see Joshua Pratt here and Matthew Crisp, two drivers who've had a very difficult start to their day, and will Crisp a little bit far off the back of Pratt, but Pratt absolutely harassing Joe Amos. They make the way through 12 and on towards turn number 1 here, and the elite driver wants to come on past the pro as soon as possible as they make the way on down and round towards turn number 1 once again. But as they come roaring on through, we do look from them to a little bit further back to Tom Farr here, who finds himself in the sandwich of Martin Fernie and Colin Patterson, and these three of course all racing in the pro class as they make the way to the timeline. And as they come on through here in front of an absolutely packed grandstand, heading down towards turn number 1, with the privateer looking to try and defend here at the head of the group, having gone high and around the outside, and right now onto the brakes he goes, and you can see that Fernie having to battle hard as they make the way through with Colin Patterson trying to go outside to inside, but in the end Fernie covers them off very nicely and now brings it to bear as they come on down towards turn number 4. This is the battle for P12 in what is the pro class. They make the way on around here, and will in the sandwich right now of the three of them. You do have an absolute stockade of AMS behind, as led by Daniel Pace, and it's Ben Watkinson behind Pace, who's also trying to get into the hunt. But as they make the way in towards turn number 6, we look from them to a little bit further back in the order to Dion Wren here, who right now having had a very difficult start to his race. The privateer trying to find a bit of space in Simon Hartley, albeit the pro's got to try and come past the AM driver sooner rather than later, because right now all of his pro peers are a lot further up the road. Now we have unfortunately had 2 retirements in this race so far. We've had the retirement of Frank Klein and also Hakon Gristad, but meanwhile as our drivers make the way on around, I believe Gristad is a technical issue, and therefore you can imagine it to an engine blowout with regards to the fact the technical issue has taken him out of the race, which is very unfortunate. We do look from the back of the field up towards the very front of the field, and here's Josh Fletcher as he comes towards the end of lap number 5, and as he does here, Joe Newman continues to follow him. Newman then giving him a little bit of bump on the rear. That's a bit of a bump draft there, where he's giving him the tap to say to him, no, you can carry a bit more speed on the run to turn number 1, but now they separate once again as they come under braking here, so as it would be a bit of a tricky situation if they were to get too close together. Now as they make the way on through and down towards turn number 4, fastest lap of the race has just gone to Paul Smith there in the pro class, and as they make the way on around it, Paul Smith set at 43.62, but as our elite driver here, Fletcher, makes his way out of turn number 4, definitely right now focusing more on strategy rather than outright pace in terms of lap on lap. But meanwhile we look back to Peter Cox here, he's on the inside of Jeff Griffiths. Griffiths down the outside, it's the battle of the Lamborghinis, and as they make the way out to turn number 6 and up towards 7, well, Griffiths isn't backing out, and behind him you can see Emily the Frazina's just watching this, and you can imagine we're a metaphorical bucket of popcorn in fact as they come out of turn 4 and up towards 6, so a little bit ahead of ourselves there, but Frazina on the inside, who Griffiths is made to go outside and deep into turn number 6, and in the end Griffiths gives it away, but in return I think Griffiths right now knowing that it's not a need to battle, instead he just needs to focus on delivering his strategy here, and then looking at potential strategy later in the race in terms of how he cuts back ahead of Cox. They make the way up into the banking of 8. And as I come on through here, what's the big question around strategy, I hear you ask? Well, we could be potentially seeing the opportunity for a number of drives to go extremely long into this race, given the fact we do expect everyone to do one pit stop, and it will only be for fuel, not tyres. With the amount of fuel saving that can be done in the long slipstream trains on the run of the bank in here, would be low to not imagine that our drivers will be doing as much fuel saving, a much short shift and much lift and coast as they can when they can't pass or do not need to pass, and in return that may just open up the opportunity for some drivers to go extremely long. Alternatively, the converse of that would be if a driver can work with somebody else, and right now Sherwood and Leon definitely not working together here in the battle for P11 in what is the battle in the elite class, and battling for P12 overall, was they make their way across the timeline down towards turn number 1. That's what happens when bump drafting does not go perfectly right. The driver you tap on the rear ends up with a little bit of a loss of rear end control, but thankfully Lee able to get it stopped before that could have ended in calamity as he makes his way through 2, 3 and up into 4. But onto the brakes here, and right now currently running in P12 overall, Sam Sherwood behind. And again, if these guys decide to pit earlier, so they may decide to pit together as a group and then run together to try and gain ground on the leaders should they pit a bit later. And that's where the strategy really comes in. If you pit and come out on a circuit with nobody around you to act as a little bit of a slipstream magnet, then you may just find yourself losing a lot of race time for all the best strategy in the world, for the simple reason you're not gaining, say, 4 to 5 miles an hour on each and every straightaway here in the US. But as they make the way on down, right now drivers will be thinking all about who are they working with, who are they racing against, and theoretically where can they potentially move themselves on the grid, as we do look from Sherwood to Matthew Crisp, fellow elite driver there up the inside of Kukuslas as they make the way out of turn number 7 and in towards 8 and coming on through here. Chris right now having had a difficult start, looking to gain a lot more ground back. Speaking of difficult starts, we take a look at what happened to Jakub Boschov on the opening lap. This was right at the start, and as he came out to turn number 6, does the rear end step wide? It does indeed, on cold tyres and trying to get the power down, and the Ignium Motorsport Spark driver just making a mistake that cost him very dear. And I do believe a very similar incident in fact happened for what was Matthew Crisp. Now this was a lap later for the privateer of Matthew Crisp on lap number 2 as he was chasing after Daniel Lee. They came in the break and Lee there gave him the space, but he came into it, and Lee actually being given a shoulder barge there from the rear of Matthew Crisp's car as he went on around. So Crisp with a mistake that cost him very dear. And also we did have in between those two incidents a mistake for Dion Wren, which we can take a look back here, and I think it's going to be at the same corner, and it may be a pack of 3. In fact, no, it's not, as he comes very hot into the side of the 33 car there under braking, and that car, well, Dion Wren in the end of puncturing into the side of the 33, but thankfully only himself being turned in, not the 2 drivers going on around, but still the privateer there with a bit of a hot move under braking and not quite working out as we return to those live pictures. But as our drivers make the way on around, the question is, of course, who was the 33 car in the mix there? Well, that was Martin Fernie, fellow road driver, and well, as we come back here to live pictures focusing on Matthew Crisp, we do look to what is a bit further up the field, and particularly to Stephen Masters here, who right now, last of the runners inside the overall top 10. He's running P9 in the elite class. He chases after what is Si Anthony, and as he makes his way over the bank in there at turn number 8. Well, right now Stephen Masters started to feel the effects of when you're not close enough to another driver to really be in a pack. Now the Tiki Simsport tow driver, to be fair to his credit, he will be picking up a distant tow off of the back of the likes of Smith and also Anthony in front of him, but you can imagine that gap between them, if it does extend to about 6-7 tenths, he'll start to lose that feel of tow, or the bolster of the tow over the course of the entire run on the straight, because these GT3 cars, they'll feel the tow for one another all the way up to approximately 2 seconds, but they really pick up within a second, and it becomes extremely strong when they get within half a second of one another, and that's where, when you're in that half-second window, you can really begin to lift and coast. But meanwhile, looking at the front of the field, Joe Newman here on the low line, going up the inside of Fletcher, and there Josh Fletcher not offering too much resistance as they make the way through turn 1, and you can see this top 6 pack here all serpentining together as they make the way through 2, 3 and up towards 4, and we look back from the rear here of Joe Newman's car as he comes into the horseshoe hairpin of turn 4. Now making his way on through, we have heard we've had a couple of drives have to be towed to the pits, including Jakub Boschov, also Ollie Pimley and also Michael Warrington. We believe there's been a huge incident for Michael Warrington, which we'll get a replay of very shortly for you. But notice now with Joe Newman at the head of this group, he now has to dictate the pace of this race in terms of who is going to be running to what lap time here. And I think Newman may be feeling as though he's got the pace to break away from the rest of the pack behind. But in turning, if he's not able to break away, he won't want to try and push his luck for too long and push the pace for too long, because otherwise what he does, he increases the tempo of the race, he uses more fuel up in his car, but everyone else behind him, if they can stay with him, can continue to fuel save, and that means it's actually a net loss for Newman. And that's the thing now, it's almost as these guys are playing a game of chess, albeit in cars in excess of 160 miles an hour on the straight, whereby they've got to figure out, is it worth them pushing, is it worth them leading the group, or should they be the car behind to fuel save? Because of course we saw in season 8 just how strong fuel saving was from the likes of Jonathan Hitchin and also Daniel Thomas, whereby the amount of fuel saving they did behind other drivers meant that they gained 3 or 4 seconds in the pit lane when they came in the sprint races. And we could be seeing that dynamic occurring right now between Newman and Fletcher, and indeed everybody behind, because you also have Sam Congreve, Daniel Thomas, Ryan Moles and Martin Tilling in this top 6 group. It's 5 Audis followed up by a McLaren as they make their way down towards turn one. But now Newman goes high, he lifts off there, and notice how much speed he shaves off the car by going high in a brief lift. But this leads to a 2x2 situation now, as we can see that coming up is in the inside of Daniel Thomas, coming up the inside of Sam Congreve behind is Daniel Thomas, as the Welshman here battles with Congreve, and that's where you can see the two SimRacing Red teammates have stepped on one another, and now Thomas creeps on in for Protect Motorsport, but Congreve does not want to put a car between himself and his teammate here, and really buffets the wall as they make the way through 4 and up towards 6, and now digging in here, it's very clear to Protect Motorsport that Thomas and Ryan Moles are going to have to find their way past Congreve as they make the way up towards turn number 6. Now the problem is with this battling, has the gap opened up enough for the top 2? No, it has not. You can see how they're coming back together, but that's why already Daniel Thomas has let this go. He knows he cannot afford to battle with Congreve, otherwise they lose the top 2, and then it becomes a race for third, not a race for the win. And as they make the way out to turn number 7, they continue on in formation once again as they make the way down towards the bus stop chicane. Now further back we look to Martin Fernie here, running P32 overall, but more importantly class-wise P11 in the Pro class, looking to try and find his way up into the Pro top 10 versus Daniel Merchant as he makes his way through the right hand of turn number 6. And with these two being close together for some time, because Fernie sported some damage on the car with contact earlier in the race, as we saw with fellow driver Dion Wren, and as they make the way through turn number 7 here, Fernie looking very calm and collected right now as he makes his way up onto the banking, with Colin Patterson a little bit further behind, and Patterson Tiki Simsports, number 737 driver, making his way on towards turn number 9 as he comes on down. But Patterson in the distant toe here, falling back a little bit, and indeed really now starting to lose that ability to be in the draft, with that gap opening up to a second off the back of Fernie, if not more. But as he comes on down, we look back up to the elite leaders here as they make the way into the braking zone. You can see in the battle for P3, Congreve really digging in here as Thomas tries to go high and around the outside at 1, and well, they're all really picking points over one another here as they make the way down towards turn number 4. We ride on board with Ryan Moles running for Protect Motorsport P5 in the 18 Audi as he comes through turn number 4, stuck right in behind here, and as they make the way up towards turn number 6, well, right now I think that Moles and also there Thomas are beginning to get a little bit frustrated in the fact that Congreve seems to be very insistent that he wants to be the guy behind his teammate from SimRacing Red, or that what is their Newman. Now you can understand it, they're running 2x2 in terms of team formation, but Tilling's also just behind this, and the McLaren driver could be a bit of fly in the ointment for all of them if he's able to find a way to get in amongst the group. And I think that is why Thomas wants to try and get a move on, and Moles wants to come through with him. They want to be the two behind the leader of Fletcher and shaping it up in exchange of the places. But as they make the way on, you can see, look at the gap between Congreve and then Newman. That gap has opened up quite significantly. Not enough for them to lose the toe of the leaders, but if they continue to fight, then this really could now end up being a loss of a run for the lead of the race, unless strategy brings it back into contention as they make the way into the chicane once more. But going through the bus stop here, Moles, they're getting a very smooth run, but having to back off slightly so as not to clip the rear of his teammate as he makes his way out of 11 and on towards 12. We do now get that replay that we promised you earlier of Michael Warrington and what happened to him, and here it is on lap number 8. So back Michael Warrington there, already having a bit of an instant before we get to see him park the car up, so it looks as though it went very, very wrong. We take a look back a little bit further on lap number 8, and well, it looks over here he's had quite the coming together with some other drivers. We're still trying to understand what exactly happened, but it looks as though there was at least 2 drivers involved in the incident. And this was coming through the bus stop chicane, in fact, and the TT6 car Marte driving, oh goodness me, and now I believe it's Ollie Pimley there connected, and also I believe Boschov. We now try to see what happened to Jakob Boschov. In fact, that was not Boschov there, the Eden Motorsport Spark driver involved in a completely separate incident where the car's gone sideways coming out of turn number 6. So Bosch up there, and that's why he had to tow to the pitch due to damage, but we're not exactly sure what happened to Michael Warrington. Now we think it is Ollie Pimley here involved in the incident. He lost the rear coming out of the bus stop chicane. The Civic Esports black driver connecting what is the Lamborghini there of the number 6, I do believe, and that explains the whole story as we now return to live pictures. So Pimley, Warrington, and also the number 6 car, as we just try to understand who that was specifically. In fact, I think it was the number 8 car, Daniel Merchant, coming together, and then Jakob Boschov in a completely separate incident at turn number 6. But a nasty one for the trio at the bus stop chicane, and with 20 minutes now complete, this race now started to step into that mid-stage where that pit stop now starts to loom on the horizon in terms of is anybody going to be going early rather than late. As they make the way on down here, we also do see a Slashed Noodles there in the YouTube chat saying good luck Simford, and that was at the very start of the race there. And also we do see McGraw Carmo saying go for it Daniel, and I believe that may be in reference, correct me if I'm wrong, to Daniel Merchant, who's unfortunately had a bit of bad fortune since then. But do keep letting us know, ladies and gentlemen, tuning in the YouTube chat, who you are supporting, which teams and which drivers are you cheering on here today as they make the way on around. Still plenty of time to go, and well, John Eddowes here just tucks in behind fellow UKSimRacing driver of Davies there as they make the way on towards turn number 1 once again. Well, Davies in the elite class here, Eddowes in the pro class, and neither one of them wants to step toes on the other right now. They're working together very nicely as they make the way through turn number 1. Coming on through a bit further back, Peter Cox here, not having the luxury of working with everybody, as you can see there. That's Matthew Crisp trying to go around the outside, and for Peter Cox right now, he's probably got the worst possible situation you could ask for. Pro driver in mind. In front to him is your AM leader of Fresina. Behind him is an elite driver who wants to come through the field. He hasn't got a pro driver ahead of him he can really work with, aka John Eddowes. So in return right now, he's having to worry about the fact that this scrambling with the AM and the elite, what it's doing is actually pushing him backwards towards Nathan Scott, the SimRacing blue driver, as they make the way down into turn number 6. Now as they come through, Nathan Scott loses the rear of the car, and it didn't look as though there was contact there, but Nathan Scott goes on around, and I think that might have been a bit of an overly aggressive downshift there in terms of the sequential transmission as he came on through, and well for him, he's got to wait there as everybody past the seas around the stricken Lamborghini, but they all safely make the way through. Nathan Scott very gingerly brings it back around to make sure he does not go wide on the grass into the tyre barrier, but Nathan Scott there with an unfortunate incident, he drops all the way almost to the back of the pro class. Only Dion Wren, the other runner behind him in the class, and Wren there in the rear of the picture trying to find his way past Daniel Pays, but then Nathan Scott getting it wrong. But meanwhile, one driver who's getting it very, very right is Fresina at the head of the AM class as he comes on through the bus stop chicane, the 369 car, and right now 4.7 seconds clear of his closest AM rival of what is Kukuslas, as meanwhile we've got some pit stops coming up, and we've got major pit stops right now. It's the leaders of the elite cars coming in, and that answers your question, which is from Phil Mayer, are the pits open for fuel yet? Yes, they most definitely are, as we reach the halfway point of the race, and Fletcher comes on in, much like what we also got is Sam Congreve. We've also got Cy Anthony, Stephen Masters, Paul Smith's in from the lead of the pro class, everybody piling on in, and that releases John Eddowes to become the leader of the pro class in P6 overall, as he's yet to take his pit stop. Of course, he makes his way through the horseshoe hairpin of turn 4 and now heads up towards turn number 6 once again, but so many drivers into the pits. In fact, we've got the leaders of the AM class in as well, as we see there Kukuslas in, and well, he was not the leader coming into the pits, and Fresina you would expect will come past it very shortly as he leaves his pit stall already, and Kukuslas meanwhile still being refueled, but that goes to show you just how much he's going. In fact, Kukuslas I think has left his pit stall unless I'm mistaken, and he may in fact be slightly closer to his rival, but as they all come on through, it is pit stop season aplenty. We're waiting to see how they all factor back together. It looks as though Adrian Kukuslas there caught in behind what is Gaines and Griffiths, the two pro drivers, as he gets up to speed on pit lane exit very shortly. They pass the pit limiter line, and now they can go hammer and tongs on the throttle, but it is definitely now going to be a shuffle in the field. But with all the shuffling of the drivers, we do look to what is your elite class here, and here is Joe Newman, one of a limited number of the leaders who decide not to pit. And there's Joe Newman ahead of Daniel Thomas, and also behind Ryan and Moles as they make the way onto the bank in a turn number 12. And as they roar the way on through, of course, for Joe Newman in the 997 Audi, will he come in this time or will he decide to continue to go? He pulls on in here. You can also see behind coming in very hot there on the brakes, and Daniel Thomas with a very cheeky pass under braking into the pit lane. Well, I think he made the pit limiter line, but that is very cheeky for the ProTech Motorsport driver there. I think that he felt that Joe Newman just came in a little bit too gently for his liking, and about just going up the inside and saying, don't mind if I do. Now, of course, with that little scramble between the two of them, where is the lead pack that's already pitted? Well, here it is, led by Josh Fletcher. In fact, has gained almost a whole second on Sam Congreve behind as they make the way through the bank of 12. Newman is still in his pit stall. Thomas, Moles and Tilling already leaving the pit. So is Valandia. And in fact, Thomas there is going to be the leader coming out the pit as we wait to see where they all factor out. And there is the sequence of drivers as they come on through. And you'll see them all there coming together. Daniel Thomas is going to lead temporarily, but will he be leading in the run to turn number 4? It's going to be close, but Daniel Thomas has jumped ahead of everybody to take the lead of this race as he makes his way through turn number 4 here. And right now he's your overall and elite leader by a margin of 4/10 over teammate Ryan Moles, as meanwhile Joe Newman has come out alongside Fletcher. Of course, these two rivals before they separated their ways into the pit lane, and now Newman back ahead, albeit the top two are now going to try and run away as quickly as possible. But the pit stops have definitely shaken up the elite class. What about in other classes in the field, I hear you ask? Well, we can confirm that Paul Smith has returned out of the pit lane in the lead of the pro class by 6.5 tenths over fellow teammate from Ignium Motorsport of Ed Knight, albeit I believe running in the sister outfit of Ignium Motorsport Spark, but still Ignium Motorsport right now 1-2 in the pro class as they make the way around. And John Eddowes is tucked in behind there, P3 in the pro class, so he's not on the hunt yet. As we see JD Callahan saying in the YouTube chat, John Eddowes, we love you. And well, right now Tiki Silverstone are definitely going to be proud of their driver as he makes his way down towards turn number 9. But in the charge, what about in the AM class? Have we seen any shake-ups there? Well, it is now Kukuslas who leads in the AM class, and in fact, we believe that we have lost Frazina completely. Now, what on earth has happened to Edith Frazina? I believe there may have been some sort of incident that's cost him very dearly. We are trying to understand what's happened, but, well, Frazina, it's all gone very wrong, Fox. He's been towed to the pit lane, and I believe it may have been a retirement, but we're not quite sure. We haven't got any replay footage as to what exactly happened. We are going to try and find out for you what happened to our leader of the AM class, who was leading comfortably for such a period of time, but no information at the moment. But what information we do have is that Frazina right now out of the race, and Kukuslas can really run away with this by comparison as he chases after Alex Gaines and Jeff Griffiths, who are battling to be the final driver in the top 5 in the pro class. And it's going to be Gaines on the outside, Griffiths on the inside. It's a battle on the brakes. Both drivers then releasing the brakes into turn number 1 as late as they dare. But Gaines out on the outside, being made to drop it slightly as they make the way up towards turn number 4. And right now it may not be for the podium, but for both drivers it's going to feel like they're battling for the win as far as they're concerned, as they make the way out of turn 4 and up towards turn number 6 as they come roaring on through. Two more pro drivers battling into turn 1. We can see it's top 5 versus what is there, Nathan Scott on the inside after his spin earlier on, demoted to outside the top 5 of the pros. But meanwhile top 5 they're losing the position too. Scott as they make the way through 2, 3 and up towards 4, but still trying to come back a little bit later on in this Lamborghini on Lamborghini action. But as they make the way through 4 and up towards turn number 6, behind them Ben Watkinson, clear of Daniel Pace, and now inside the top 5 of the AM class after a good pit stop from the crew of the Privateers outfit. And as he makes his way up towards turn number 6 right now, definitely on course for a good set of points here today if he brings it all together at the finish. But meanwhile, speaking of a big haul of points, well, we look to Daniel Thomas as he makes his way across towards turn number 1 very shortly once again. And right now it does look as though the race wind could be starting to creep away between these two drivers of Thomas and teammate Moles for Protect Motorsport. But as they head down, of course, now for Moles, he's got to just simply play the team game up to a point. And I wonder if the two drivers may start to square off against one another as they go into the final 5 minutes, or whether the team will focus on just getting the points and stay in formation. Behind them, Joe Newman, P3, meanwhile still inching as close as he can to the top 2. But I think for him, his big concern is Martin Tilling behind. And Tilling, well, he started at P6 when all the pit stops started playing on Alpha Tiki's but as he makes his way out of turn 4 and up towards 6 right now, the McLaren driver has jumped 2 places over Josh Fletcher and Sam Congreve, and we believe that Congreve's been involved in a slight incident which has dropped him out of this run of the top 5, as it was 6 running this pack. Now it's only 5 drivers, Fletcher at the back of it. Indeed, any one of these 5 drivers could theoretically win this race right now, but they've got a long way to go. 15 minutes left by the time they get to the end of this lap. as they come out of turn at number 7 and onwards towards the bank in the lane. Notice how different lines with different drivers here. Fletcher decided to go overly deep there on the exit, really open up the corner and give themselves some breathing room to run in the toe. Meanwhile, Tilling there decided to be very confrontational, corner exit, really taking a tight exit line, and then, well, for what is Newman, really a mixture of the two. And I wonder here if any of our leaders have opted to underfuel the car in the pit lane, knowing they may be able to do some fuel saving later on in the race in terms of running in the draft of multiple drives. As we see there, James Connolly staying clear on the right hand side, letting the lead pack of 5 going through, and James Connolly having a difficult day today, no question about it, but still trying to do everything he can as he runs P15, last of the runners in the AM class here in the 46 Ferrari, and heading down towards turn number 1 once again. And well, it may be a little bit lonely at the moment, but still staying on track and looking to bring home some key points in his championship campaign. But behind him we do have the rising pair here, the rising trio we should say. Sam Congreve on the low line there for SimRacing Red, but meanwhile going high and getting pushed along. Well, that is Sight Anthony and Sean Valandia trying to go around the outside of Tiki Sport Kimmy. It's going to be very close on the braking, and will Congreve there make sure to get his nose and says one's enough, not 2 of you coming through, thank you. And as they make their way through 2 and 3, up towards 4 they go. Well, Sight Anthony now jumps up into P6 here, leaves it quite late in terms of getting it done to move up to the top of this group. I think right now you'd be hoping they were a bit closer to the top 5, but still, this is where it's going to roll in terms of where the dice have fallen, and he'll be battling for P6 in the elite class as they make their way up towards turn number 6. As they come through, we're hearing that Joe Newman and Ryan Moles have exchanged places on the run out of turn 6 into 7, but Daniel Thomas is still leading. That's off camera, that's occurred. And well, in the other classes here, we have got a little bit of breathing room by comparison with regards to those battles for the win, with Paul Smith right now, the pro driver here, P11 overall, but more importantly for him, leader of the pro class. And as he comes out of turn number 7 here, he's got Stephen Masters behind him, and Masters being a elite driver, not in the same class. And then behind Smith in class is Edward Knight, and Smith of course being part of one of the 2 Ignium Motorsport teams, and then Edward Knight being part of the second team of Spark. You would imagine that right now they'll run close together, and well, Edward Knight's got to be focused, I think, a little bit more on the rear gunner action potentially, with John Eddowes there falling slightly back in the run to the bus stop chicane, but the Tiki Sport Kimmy driver, I think, just playing the long run, as we do get confirmation there for Andrew McGovern in the YouTube chat. Unfortunately for what was Eden Frazina, PC issues, so it is a technical fault that has retired him from the race, and we chalk that up of course to being the equivalent of, say, an engine failure in the race. It's difficult and it does happen, and all the emotions that come with it. But meanwhile, speaking of emotions here, emotions are running high right now at the very front of the field, as we see Ryan Moles takes the lead there from Daniel Thomas, and will Protect Motorsport have not been successful in breaking away from the chasing groups. They can't turn this into a 2-way fight for the win between teammates. Instead, it will still be a 5-way fight all the way to the finish, as Tilling here stays in amongst the group as well, and Fletcher at the back of it as they come on down and around and out towards turn number 6 on the infield. As they head in towards the braking zone, we look a little bit further back here to Jeff Griffiths, privateer, who is still, as we ride on board with the Lamborghini Huracan driver, he is still battling for what is P5 in the pro class, P19 overall, versus Alex Gaines here. And these two, they have been inseparable with regards to the battling, but it looks like their Gaines getting a better run out of the hairpin as they make their way towards turn number 6. The other thing that has to be factored in, of course, now as we go deeper into this race, is that tyre degradation does start to become a key influencer in terms of how much speed our drivers can carry from corner to corner and lap after lap. And some drivers who may have pushed the tyres quite hard early on in the infield section may now be feeling the consequences of that in terms of not able to carry as much speed as they make their way through turn number 7 here. Griffiths staying well within reach. 7 tenths is the gap as they make their way onto the oval banking, and will now he'll gradually close up, we suspect, in that toe by a couple of attempts in the run down to the chicane. But as he comes on through, we do look from Jeff Griffiths to a little bit further down the order to Joel Amos here. And Amos P12 in the pro class right now. In front of him, that is Ben Watkinson and Daniel Page. And then behind he's got Michael Warrington and Ryan Gonzalez. Warrington and Gonzalez on separate laps down compared to leaders in the AM class and overall. Meanwhile, in front of Amos, Watkinson and Page, both AM drivers battling for P5 in the class. And here is Daniel Page from Old Dudes in Cars, who's trying to hold position as best as he can as he makes his way through turn number 8 and onwards towards the bus stop chicane. But as they come charging on through a little bit further back, it's Thomas Barjak here, P9, the privateer in the full team car, and we're in a bit of a lonely position right now as he heads on through when it's turn at number 7. But as we look from him to Sam Sherwood, we're off in the distant view as we see all the lead group come on through, and then there's the second group battling from P6 to P8, and then Sam Sherwood is at the very tip of the third group battling from P9 all the way back, and this is overall we're referring to, battling all the way back to what is P16. Sherwood right now for Protect Motorsport really having to try and hold Daniel Lee at bay as they make the way through turn number 6. Now as they come on through here and head up towards turn number 7, well, Lee of course will be looking to try and deploy what he can in terms of the straight line speed of the Ferrari as he makes his way on or around, but then he does have the two pro leaders of Paul Swift and Edward Knight behind, and then Stephen Masters behind them, who is of interest given the fact that Masters is an elite driver much like the class of Lee, and as they make the way on towards turn at number 9 shortly. Right now for Lee, he does have a buffer, and it means he can look more forwards than he does need to look back as he tries to find a way past Sam Sherwood. Sherwood then knows that Lee's getting close. Does Lee go for it here? No, he waits. I think he'll wait for the run through the chicane and then go for it in the run towards turn number 1 if he's going to try and make the move this time around. He bounces off the curve in there, and they all do indeed, and make the way up to turn number 12. We can see a little bit further up the road is Sam Congreve battling with Sean Valandia as they make the way on through. Now Valandia going high, Congreve staying low, and in the draft to Cy Anthony. So I think right now the SimRacing red driver will be quietly mouthing a thank you to the privateer in front in terms of the fact that's giving him a bit of extra straight line speed to stay ahead. But as they make the way into turn number 1, we are here, and there's been a bit of an instant further. Oh goodness me, and at turn number 1 we've got multiple cars sideways. They're all trying to clear, but it looks though that Joe Newman and Martin Tiller have been involved in some sort of shunt together at turn number 1. We will try and find out what happened very shortly, but Tilling and all of that, now the TE6 Sport corporate driver has been dropped back into the second pack, and that second pack now effectively is the battle for P4 rather than the battle for P6 as Tilling and Newman have both fallen into it. But as they make the way through, you also look at this one, Sherwood, if he carries on at this rate he will catch up, and that battle for P5 will extend all the way back to P16 effectively, because he's well within arm's reach. And as they make the way on through and around right now, charging up towards turn number 8, we do take a look back at what exactly happened between Martin Tilling and Joe Newman. This was only moments ago, riding on board here of Martin Tilling. So that's Joe Newman in front, and oh goodness me, and well there, Tilling had to back off under brake and a little bit of grass, and in the end, well, I think Tilling feeling as though he was compressed towards the tyre barrier. Well, he made it to the tyre barrier in the end after taking the grass, but that was a very awkward situation for the pair of them. We look at Joe Newman here from the gearbox, and remember Joe Newman being slightly savage there, Tilling on the inside, and as they came on through, Tilling down his inside, a brief tap, and well, the two in that instant you can see there as they come through. We now look to the exterior cameras of both drivers as they came on down, and well, I think Newman being caught out by the Protect car, and then Tilling saw the inside, but it is the tiniest bit of space that cost them dear, and Josh Fletcher meanwhile dodging the incident and making his way between the two of them. As we return to the live pictures now, we do look back up to the very front of this battle for what is P5 here between Anthony Valandia and Congreve as they make the way down under braking. But through the left-hander side, Anthony here, he was in the middle of the trio, and he's found a way to continue to part the seas as they make the way through 2, 3, and up towards 4. And there, Sam Congreve, I think, having to back outside in that inside line, and Valandia the same on the outside as they make the way in towards the Horseshoe Hairpin. But coming on through, we can see the Bickley Motorsport asking just me or no sound, and well, it does seem as though for everybody else tuning in, the sound is coming through at the moment. But thank you for double checking in case there is a technical issue with the broadcast. Welcome to you, Bickley Motorsport, and thank you there for Eden Motorsport, Jamie, for confirming as our drivers make the way on through as they come charging through turn number 6 and up towards 7 here. We do see this long pack of cars right now going all the way back from P5 to what is effectively a P16 overall. Ryan Davies here, who's P13 in the elite class. It's mostly an elite group, but there are a couple of pros sandwiched in there, and it is the top 3 of the pros who find themselves in amongst the group, led by Edward Knight here for Eden Motorsport Spark, who has swapped places with Paul Swift. I think there has been a little bit of an interchange between the trio, because earlier on we did see on the time turn update that said that Edos had passed Knight, but Knight is now ahead of both Edos and Smith, and perhaps all the coming together to turn number 1 and how this pack has all stapled itself together has really shaken things up as they make the way on through. We are going to try and find out what exactly happened between the two of them, but right now as they make the way down towards turn number 1 once again. Very grudgy here. You can imagine that the closeness to the battling is only going to continue to intensify as they head towards the final 5 minutes of this race. But in terms of the move by John Eddowes versus Paul Smith, we'll get a look back at that shortly. But first we had seen Knight here and they try and keep Stephen Masters at bay, but Masters going high. Eddowes trying to come through with him, but Knight's going to be on the low here, and Eddowes immediately backs out, but Masters side by side here, and Knight has to be very picky with regards to where he fights now. Fight too hard against Masters, and Eddowes will do exactly this, which is swarm over the back of him as they come towards Horseshoe Hairpin as they come onto the brakes. Masters there can't get back on the inside, so Eddowes right now has been given clearance to go on the offensive versus Knight, and Knight could find himself right now having to really show all the defensive armour he's got as he makes his way in towards turn number 6. There is still 5 minutes plus the final lap to go, but you can see how this battling is causing this group to fall off of the battle for P5 overall, and right now they won't be considering that at all. Well, Eddowes and definitely Knight won't be, because they're battling for the win in the Pro class as they make their way in towards turn number 7. And as they come through the left-hander, Paul Smith, meanwhile, watching behind this. Start behind Stephen Masters at the moment, but to be fair, I think it's more the question of Stephen Masters wanting to come on through. The elite driver here does not want to be looking at pros battling for position. He wants that elite pack that's ahead of this group as they make the way on through and down towards the bus stop chicane. That elite group, by the way, we should point out, is now 1.5 seconds clear, and it is continuing to break rate, a very gradual rate of knots as they make the way on down. Meanwhile, speaking of that lead group here in the battle for what is P5, Sight Anthony leads it, and right now is actually starting to hold his ground, and into the wall. That is Valandia who's got it wrong in the bus stop chicane, and it's a whack to the wall, and it's a jump to the pits. There is a toe to the pits for the Tiki Supersport driver. Meanwhile, up front, we look to Daniel Thomas and Ryan Moles here, who after a brief moment, they steer clear of all the trouble and all the drama, and they continue to lead this race with time to go. But for Sean Valandia, it all went horribly wrong so very shortly, and we'll very shortly get a replay of what exactly happened. Meanwhile, Congreve on the inside of Science, he goes all in on the brakes, and Science there, I think, wanted to turn in, instead saw the Audi come charging on through, and meanwhile, it's a name that we haven't talked about as hunting the top 5 today, but Daniel Lee right now is caught up to the back of this. He's caught wind of the situation. He wants a piece of it too, and 2 drives between him and another top 5 finish as they make their way out to turn number 4 and up towards 6. But we take a look back at what exactly happened to Sean Valandia only moments ago at the bus stop chicane. Coming on through here and under braking for the Tiki Supersport Kimi driver. It looks clear so far, and as he comes on through, it just takes a little bit too much curb at 11, the right hand. You can see the rear of the car lifted up, and then the car just went. But as we return to the live pictures, a difficult day for Valandia, but still plenty more to go, and doing so well deep into this race, but all unfolding right at the end. Meanwhile, we have got Edward Knight. They're going very slowly. He's lost the lead of the Pro class, and there's more drama before this race is over, and Knight there involved in what looks to be a little bit of a moment at turn number 7. We take a look back. Eddowes coming up behind Knight, and Knight, as he went into the corner, goes deep, and the rear steps out, and he makes contact with Eddowes, but in the end, in fact, I think by making contact with Eddowes, albeit Eddowes may not appreciate it too much, Knight saving himself from going completely around to the inside. So I think the Indian Motorsport Spark driver might be offering to buy the driver a drink later on, but meanwhile, as they make the way on back up to speed, we return to the live pictures here, and now as they come on through, well, Knight continuing on as they make the way down towards turn number 1, but meanwhile we've got even more drama here. Eddowes, I think, has just been involved in an incident as well. Every time we cut away for a replay, something goes horrifically wrong for somebody in a major position, and right now John Eddowes seems to be involved in a bit of an incident. What exactly has happened to John Eddowes, we will find out very shortly, as he has dropped all the way down to P5 in class, and Edward Knight right now is leading the Pro class behind Ryan Davis and Nathan Foster, battling for being inside the elite top 10, and well, as they make the way on through, we've also had Paul Smith drop back to P6. Something has gone so very wrong for a number of drivers, and well, we're trying to just figure out what exactly has gone wrong as we are waiting on a replay. But meanwhile, Foster versus Davies, they continue to fight hard as they make the way down towards turn number 6, but as they do, Foster gets ahead, as meanwhile a little bit further back, Matt Maddox here, third place in the AM class, trying to hold it high around the outside of Colin Patterson, but I think in the end, in fact, letting Patterson go as they make the way down into turn number 1 once more. We still do have 1.5 minutes on the clock, and we quickly do get a replay of what exactly happened between Knight and Eddowes. Well, this was after everything else happened, and John Eddowes already spearing off the circuit there, and well, Eddowes getting it wrong. into the bus stop chicane, and Paul Smith, by looks of it, is getting it wrong separately. Well, the two drivers are involved in some sort of calamity, but we must return to the live pitch now, ladies and gentlemen. 1 minute to go, and there'll be no more replays on this point because it's coming to the end of the race. Let's focus on the here and now, and as we look to the front of the field, it is Daniel Thomas who leads as he heads towards the final lap here. They will turn 26 laps under race conditions today as he heads to the line, and behind him is teammate Ryan Moles. Now, will they stay in formation all the way to the end, or will they now battle to the finish here to try and get the upper hand on one another? Well, Thomas, of course, would love to take the win today because then that would make it 2 wins out of 2. Meanwhile, looking back in the battle for P5, it's Newman on the inside and it's Lee around the outside. That's the battle for P4 now as they come through. Newman there just keeps Lee at bay. Meanwhile, Lee and Congreve side by side as they come through 2-3. It's Lee on the inside, Congreve on the outside, and Lee tries to outbrake the Audi, but the brakes on that Audi seem to be a little bit more hooked up, and as they power out corner, it's still a side-by-side run briefly, but Lee not having the acceleration there versus Congreve as they make the way down towards turn number 6. Behind them, Martin Tillin battling with Cy Anthony for P7 overall in the elite class as they make the way in towards the right-hander, and Cy Anthony there going defensive as he comes on through, and he's wary of the fact that Martin Tillin could be very fast in the run out of 6 and up towards 7 and potentially put that pressure on in the run to the finish. But it's not just about the elites battling, of course, with the fact that we do still have some battles unresolved further down, including the battle between Martin Fernie and Chris Edison for P7 in what is the pro class as they come on through up towards turn number 4 themselves respectively. But meanwhile, we look back to Cy Anthony here, who is trying to keep Martin Tillin at bay, and Tillin in the McLaren. He won't have too much straight line speed. That McLaren's not known for its top end, it's known for its cornering speed, and now Cy Anthony comes them off initially, but as they make the way on through and down towards the bus stop chicane, Cy Anthony stays ahead. Meanwhile, we look to the front of the field, and they're going to stay as is as they make the way through the final corner. It has been a race of strategy as well as having the pace from start to finish, but ProTech Motorsport have done it. They've shown they can dominate a Daytona, and as they make the way to the line, it will be a ProTech Motorsport 1-2 led across the line by Daniel Thomas ahead of Ryan. In fact, hold it, that Ryan Moles who took the win at the very end on the line. Well, one of the two took the win, and then Josh Fletcher P3 ahead of Daniel Lee and Sam Corey Joe Newman in a freeway run to the end. Martin Tillin in P7 there, ahead of Cy Anstey P8, then Sam Sherwood, Nathan Foster complete the top 10, Ryan Davies 11, and then it is Edward Knight who takes P12 overall, but the pro win went Porty ahead for him ahead of Matthew Chris, Pete Cox P2 in the pro class, Alex Gaines P3 in the pro class, once again going through the field to the podium, Jeff Griffiths P4, then John Harris P5 in class, and it will be Adrian Kukuslas who brings on home the win in the AM class, P18 overall in a brilliant drive, ahead of Paul Smith, Martin Fenn and Chris Eddersford. Darren Sharples, when all is said and done, will be your AM at second place finisher, P22 as he comes to the line here, and then it will be very shortly what is Matt Maddox who comes across line P3 in the AM class ahead of Nathan Scott and Mark Johnson. Colin Patterson just ahead of him, and Mark Johnson P4 in class ahead of Tom Fart and Joel Amos before we get our 5th place finisher in the AM class there of Daniel Page. But a brilliant race from start to finish from all of our drivers as we do switch back to the overall standings for a brief period here, as we still have a couple of drivers who've yet to finish their race a degree down. But as they make the way on through here, it won't be a down mood in the camp for the likes of Barjak or Simon Hartley as Hartley comes on through to bring home P33 overall, P18 class. And the last of our finishers on the lead lap, P34 overall, will be Thomas Barjak as the Ferrari driver comes to the line and brings on home a strong result for the Ferrari driver today. But as he crosses the line there, well, we've got quite a few moments to talk about right at the end of that race, and particularly what exactly happened in the battle for the win, and also Daniel Lee bringing home what we believe was P4 overall right at the line in a triple run to the finish. Well, we start off with that battle for P4 across the line, and here it is. As they made the way onto the line, Lee went high, and then the number 9 car of Sam Congreve had to go low, but it got boxed in by the 997 machine. Well, in fact, this was the lap before as they made the way into turn number 1. But as we wind forward a little bit, it was right at the finish, and as they made the way on through this time, Lee went high, and well, you could see that Congreve and also what was Newman on the low, and Lee with just enough space got his nose ahead and took people at the line. Goodness me, a late move, but he made it count. Meanwhile, what happened between Ryan Moles and Daniel Thomas? This is in the drag race to the line. Now, Moles went high here in the battle for the elite win, and he just got his nose ahead at the line. We thought it was Daniel Thomas, but he just snuck it off of his teammate there, and what a close ending between them. Those were the two major moments right at the end there in terms of what was photo finishes on the line effectively, but great racing from everybody, and that now means it is time for us to bring up those race results. Well, we start off initially with our overall finishing positions for our drivers, of course, and we can see here that after 45 minutes of racing in round 2 of the GT3 League Season 9, as brought to you by UKSimRacing, hosted on iRacing, Ryan Moles, your overall winner in the end by 6 thousandths of a second over Daniel Thomas in the drag race between the two ProTech Motorsport drivers. ProTech Motorsport will be absolutely pleased about making it a 1-2, and I can imagine when it's all said and done, both drivers are going to be giving them a little bit of jib with regards to that drag race right at the end, and Moles just sneaking across the line to bring home, as we understand it, his maiden overall win in the GT3 League in his career in the series. Josh Fletcher, P3 there, the privateer, battling for the win for so long, but an instant towards the end cost him dear, but still made sure he could be on the podium, and followed up by the privateer of Daniel Lee, who once again found his way all the way up to P4. Not quite on the podium this time, but still sneaking that P4 off of Sam Congreve and Joe Newman, the iRacing Red drivers, who worked together for so long, but couldn't quite make it a double top 5 for them. Martin Tillin P7, head of Sight Anthony P8, the privateer, and then Sam Sherwood and Nathan Foster completing at the top 10, with Ryan Davies P11 best of the rest. Special mentions go to P12 finisher overall of Edward Knight, your winner in the Pro Class for Ignium Motorsport Spark, and also to Peter Cox and Alex Gaines, your second and third place finishers in what is the Pro Class as well. And also we must make special mentions to Adrian Kukuslas, P18 overall for his win in the AM Class, the privateer Pippin. Darren Sharples P22 overall to that post, who finished second place on the AM podium. The privateer ahead of third place finish in the AM class, P24 overall of Matt Maddox there for BDM Racing. But those are the overall finishing positions down to P28 that we're taking you through on screen. But now as we focus more on the classes, we start off with the elite class, of course, and Ryan Moles in the end by taking that win ahead of Daniel Thomas. But ProTech absolutely unstoppable today. And again, a run of Audi dominance, it would seem, in the elite class, with Josh Fletcher in the Audi completing the elite podium ahead of Daniel Lee, Sam Congreve to round off the top 5, and then Joe Newman, Martin Tillin, Sight Anthony, Sam Sherwood and Nathan Foster completing the top 10, with Sam Sherwood and Nathan Foster battling for so long for that P9 position. I think both drivers feel as though there was more on the table today, but they had to play with what they were battling for. And then Ryan Davies, the best of the rest of the elites, P11 ahead of Matthew Crisp, who finished not a lap down, but finished in the end the last of the runners on the lead lap in the elite class. Stephen Masters 2 laps down, P13 ahead of Sean Valendia, who've had to retire 3 laps from the end with that major incident. Joshua Pratt P15, 7 laps down, and then Damian Lobbett and Hakon Gristad, and I believe that Damian Lobbett and Hakon Gristad not making 50% of the race distance and may not be considered as finishers in the race today. Unfortunate for both of them, but sometimes that's the way it goes, but still plenty more rounds for them to compete in. Then we come on to the Pro Class meanwhile, and we see confirmation there of your Pro podium of Edward Knight, Peter Cox and Alex Gaines. Now, Edward Knight, the Ignium Motorsport Spark driver, I think, given how it all played out, at one point it looked as though it had all fallen apart. The fact that he stands tall on the podium, clear of John Eddowes and Paul Smith. Of course, he won't want to have seen Smith fall off the podium, fellow Ignium Motorsport driver, but he'll be proud to have got back up there after John Eddowes took the lead off of him right towards the end, only for a mistake from Eddowes and Smith to cost them both dearly. But then Peter Cox, P2 from UKSimRacing, an unexpected P2, you could argue, but that goes to show what happens if you keep your head down all the way to the end. And the same for Alex Gaines, who once again pulls off the magic to finish on the podium, having started so far down the order, the privateer, and he continues to buck the trend. Jeff Griffiths in P4 ahead of John Eddowes in P5, and it's Paul Smith, Martin Fernie, Chris Edison, Colin Patterson and Nathan Scott who complete the Pro top 10, with Tom Farr best the rest of the Pros P11. And we can see the last 2 finishers on the lead lap of Joe Amos and Dion Wren down to P13, with Mark Collicott in the end with an early retirement, much like Daniel Merchant, Ollie Pimley and Jaco Boshoff there. And I believe that all 4 of those drivers have not cleared 50% of the distance, will be counted as non-finishers. And then we come on to the AM class, and last of our classes, but by no means least, and we see Adrian Kukusas there bringing home his maiden win in the series today. 15 seconds clear of his competitors. Darren Sharples P2, another great result for Sharples, albeit not quite taking the win. And then Matt Maddox P3 there for BDM Racing. Mark Johnson and Daniel Pace both inside the top 5 once again there, both proving they've got the pace, carrying over from Season 8, but still waiting for podiums, with Ben Watkinson there P6, the privateer, head of the Tiki Simsport drivers of Brock Freight, so Tiki Simsport baseline, and then we can see the Simon Hartley finishing P8 there for Tiki Simsport Copa. And then we have Thomas Barjac and Ryan Gonzalez completing the top 10, with Richard Curie there P11 best RS, albeit we should point out Gonzalez finishing 5 laps down, Curie 6 laps down, and then Michael Warrington 8 laps down in P12 ahead of James Conley, who finished 11 laps down there. And then I believe non-finishers, Casper Brotner, Eden Frazina, and Frank Klein, they finished P14, P15 and P16 respectively. And of course for Frazina, it's a bitter day for the privateer after leading for so long. Technical issues costing him so dear in the second half of the race, and it was a premature retirement. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, those are all the race results, of course, subject to any stewards' inquiries. And now we get ready for our post-round interviews. We'll be back in approximately 10 minutes of those to speak to our volunteer drivers. But until then, don't go too far. You won't want to miss them. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, we are back then for our post-round interviews. And today, we have 4 more volunteers lined up, one of whom you'll be very familiar with, of course, the highly enthusiastic and energetic Daniel, or Danny Lee, as he's also known, the privateer there, who we'll be hearing from very shortly, who had a very strong run, of course, in what was race number 1 of the season. Today, it has perhaps not been as strong as run by comparison, not quite on the podium, but still looking to do everything right, and he did everything right, coming from a long way back. We'll hear from him first, and then we'll come to our other elite driver and our winner for today, overall in the elite class of Ryan Moles from ProTech Motorsport. And he'll be interested to hear, in his opinion, how it all played out on that final lap and how he managed to drag his way across the line, your winner. And then we'll be hearing from the pro winner of Edward Knight from Ignium Motorsport Spark in a race that was very emotional and monumentous in the final couple of laps, where it all seemed to go wrong and then suddenly go so very right. And then also we'll be hearing from our AM winner today of Adrian Kukulas, who, the privateer there, having started on pole in class, lost the lead briefly, but found his way back into lead. He was on form to battle for lead at the end, but technical issues for Eden Frizina costing them difficulty in bringing the fight back to Kukulas, and Kukulas coming across the line, clearly your winner. Without further ado, let's hear it from our first interviewee, and as he joins us in the interview room, Danny, a strong performance from yourself tonight, albeit when we did last interview you at Silverstone a week ago, you're saying that you might have been able to take it to the run of the Audis today, but it didn't quite go so well in qualifying, but you found your way all the way back up there into the top 5 right at the very end today.
Yeah, it was quite a nice surprise. Qualifying 16th, that was very humbling because in the run up to this event, I've had the perception that the Ferrari's strong here. Did a practice race last night just to do a bit of reconnaissance, see where we're at, and it was much the same story there. It ain't as strong since iRacing just tweaked a few dials in the back end in the midweek, as I understand it. So, yeah, we're a little bit of a hill to climb, but my word, what an adventure. That really, really was about 40 minutes felt like 4 hours. There was so much packed in, and it was a brilliant race from start to finish, I've got to admit.
Oh, indeed. And speaking of that adventure, of course, the humbling in qualifying, just focusing on the laps you were able to achieve, how did you feel the car was out there? Because we saw a number of drivers in qualifying really struggling with those ambient temperatures, around 22 degrees centigrade, many having to take multiple laps to get those tyres up to temperature. Did you feel as though you could get the lap you wanted, or was the lap just not quite there?
It did seem to just get slightly quicker every lap you did, and that's normally not the case. Normally by lap 2 you're kind of in the zone. So I think in retrospect I could have pushed it harder, but as each lap went on, because we get 4 qualifying laps, the first one is basically supposed to be a 99% pace banker. You just want to get one in because it can all fall apart if you get an off track and the pressure's on. It can all quickly go downhill. So first lap was a safe banker, second lap I think was a bit quicker, third lap was a bit quicker again, fourth lap was a real Hail Mary, just chuck it in, because the bus stop chicane is the make or break part of this lap, because it's so easy to get off track. It's just flat, you can barely see it, and if you go a millimetre too far over one way or the other, you're done for, and the qualifying lap is toast. So yeah, it did take a little bit of time to ramp up, but you know, I think I did the best I could. It wasn't an angry qualifying, it was just kind of measured, controlled, just needed to make sure I had a spot on the grid.
Oh, indeed. And then going into the race itself, having to take a very controlled start, as we've just watched that back in the background whilst talking to yourself. Looked very tight in the run to turn number 1, but you managed to sneak the place off of Sam Sherwood early, and you didn't waste time in trying to make ground despite all the slipstream antics of drivers.
Yeah, there was a whisker of a false start that might have caused a bit of an accordion, a concertina effect, but luckily it only really affected the cars in front, maybe 1 or 2. So that was a little bit scary, because I thought that having seen them kind of punch for throttle too early, I expected to see a rear view mirror full of people doing the same and then a whole catastrophe happening. But luckily that didn't. That wasn't the case. People were really sensible on lap 1. They knew there was a race to be run and nobody wanted to bin it this early on. I think on lap 2, somebody did a big send in to turn 3 or 4, whatever, one of the infield corners, and I think they lost it. I think I got a ding of damage from them. Didn't seem to compromise me though, but on the pit stop it supposedly said that I had some optional repairs, so I don't know how much that affected the straight line speed, but the car was set up for maximum slippery straight line speed today. The minimum wing I could carry, the minimum rake that felt decent and still had some turning power, and it paid off.
Indeed, and as we went through the race, we saw you gradually creeping forward, but one of the challenges you encountered very early on, and I think you had to deal with through strategy, correct me if I'm wrong, was the fact the pro leaders were just in front of you, so the likes of Edward Knight, also John Eddowes and Paul Smith, and they were never going to let one another go with an elite driver trying to come on through.
No, they ended up in the kind of classic Daytona train, whereby if you're not close enough to a train of cars in front, you're never going to be. Unless they start fighting, or unless you get a helping hand from the cars behind, it's not going to happen. So for the first 10-15 minutes of the race, I thought, oh, here we go. Here's another classic, Daytona snooze fest, where the pack in front slowly creeps away and you never see them again. Unexpectedly had a bit of an unintentional, also almost helping hand from Sam Sherwood behind, and I think I can't remember the guy's name, but one of the McLarens, they bump drafted past me in convoy. Initially, I was a bit, felt a bit sad by that, lost 2 places. But as it turned out, that could have been the best thing that happened to me the whole race. They had a better, clean air pace than me somehow. They were basically pulling me along, allowing me to catch up with the train in front. And that's when I figured out that actually, maybe I need to just sit behind these guys, get pulled along, save the straight line speed until it really counts. And as you saw, it was probably thanks most in part to Sam Sherwood. He really, really helped me, and I think we cooperated a little bit there. He was bump drafting me from behind. I didn't do the same to him because I'm not experienced enough in bump drafting to do it right first time, and I don't want to experiment on Sam Sherwood's race for the first time. So hopefully he just tucked in behind me and took advantage of my straight line speed just behind me. But there really was a few stepping stones there, and Sam Sherwood, I've got to give credit to him, because without him, I think I would have been squandered in 15th, 14th still.
Oh, indeed, and credit given where it's due to the drivers around you, like you say. And then coming forward onto the strategy. Now, we saw strategy play a key part at Silverstone in terms of deciding to go early or late, but here it was all about deciding to pit with a group of drivers. And, well, just take us through your strategy. Did you decide to come in as per your original schedule, or did you really focus around perhaps tying your race to the likes of Sam Sherwood?
I think when I saw a group of cars coming into pit road before me, I kind of thought, hang on a minute, I should have pitted the lap before and maybe gained some time there, because it wasn't the fastest pit entry. Everybody was kind of tripping up over each other. Once you're in past the pit speed limit line, of course, you don't get any contact between cars, so you can all relax a bit. But on that entry, it was all a big pile on. It wasn't as fast as it could have been, but I didn't seem to suffer from the same kind of pit disadvantages as I did at Silverstone. It actually put me out more or less where I was before, in a train of cars near the tail, and that's the best thing I could have seen. I needed to stay with some cars to really make it count, that straight line speed, otherwise there was no catching them. So strategy was as plain as it could really be. I think there wasn't actually any flexibility in the strategy, because it was a full tank that we started with, and it was a full tank that went into the pits, and there was only 1 lap spare. So I think everybody was constricted by their strategies unless they were specifically aiming to fuel save. Hopefully there's a bit more variety in the next few races, but Daytona being a full throttle from start to finish, you can't help it. You're going to burn fuel no matter what.
Indeed, and whilst the strategy perhaps did not offer variety, soon the pack ahead of you, what with yourself running in pack 3 of the cars. Pack 2 started fighting very hard for P5, and we all together saw what was a run from P5 through to P16 in the closing 10 minutes of the race. Concertina in, and that's where you started to rise. When you saw the pack in front of you, was there a bit of a grin on your face starting to emerge, as though, you know what, it's sunny on for a potential top 5 here today?
Yeah, I think that my drive seemed to polish itself up a bit in the second half of the race. It really felt like everything clicked then. And then when you set a car up for the maximum straight line speed you possibly can, and with a Ferrari having a bit of a reputation for being really good at the top end, when you do that, that's what I want to see. I want to see myself coming out of the bus stop chicane with either 1 or 2 cars in front of me. As soon as we come off that banking and we're heading towards the start-finish straight, there's must be about 4 or 5 mile an hour difference, which when you're passing somebody at top of 6th gear feels like such a big pace difference. So I really did I lit my lips every time I came out of bus stop chicane with 1 or 2 cars in front of me, because I knew that they would be toast and they wouldn't see it coming either. There was no defending that Ferrari today. If I had anybody in touching distance, they were done for.
Indeed, and speaking of being within touching distance, right at the end, within distance of picking up P4, but having to battle the SimRacing red pair of Sam Congreve and Joe Newman. Just take us through that final lap, because you looked to go for the move early into turn 1. It didn't materialise with Congreve going free, typical defence into the inside, but really digging in, but then you left it all to that final run to the line.
Yeah, it all comes down to bus stop chicane. You can be right on the tail of somebody going into that chicane, and then it's a lucky dip whether or not you're going to hit your marks perfectly well, especially when you've got half of the track in front of you obscured by a car. You've got to just drive by memory alone when it comes to that. So thankfully, it all clicked. I came out of the bus stop chicane on the end of the last lap. The two of them slipstreaming each other. That tends to give me a double toe, a double slingshot, and just by mere few feet, I think somebody's posted a photo finish in the main GT3 chat. So close, and that's when you really feel like those setup changes you did, that extra risk you ran by running minimum wings, slippery as possible. That's when it really pays off. So I'm happy with what happened today. If this was damage limitation, but I came off, instantly buzzing, flushed, really happy with what happened.
Well, indeed, it's great to hear that joy and enthusiasm in your voice as always, and that pride in pulling it off. And well, we took a look back after everybody across the checker flag, and indeed it was by the smallest of margins in the end, but small margins are what can make or break a championship campaign. Speaking of the campaign, of course, next time you'll be heading to the Scuderi's home circuit of Monza in Italy. How are you feeling for the Temple of Speed?
Monza is mine and probably a lot of people's top 3 tracks, because there's just something about it. It still has a lot of straight line speed for you to make those overtakes, but you've got the tight corners. They're basically the claws, the crowbars that help you crack that gap open, and then the straights help you to put it down. So I imagine my approach to be somewhat similar. I may even just take the same setup with a few tweaks. We'll have to experiment, but I'm looking forward to it. I really love Monza, and I should be in good chances to really put it up there. Hopefully qualifying should be better, but really looking forward to that.
Oh, we love to hear it, indeed. We look forward to seeing how you get on there in a week's time. But just before we do let you go, of course, is there anybody you'd like to give a shout out to or a thank you to live on the broadcast this evening?
A shout out to the rest of the grid for once again delivering just really good racing. This is the most fun Daytona race I've ever had, and it's purely because of that. So thanks to those guys. Thanks to yourself for running the broadcast. It's always enjoyable. And just to everybody taking part, thanks for organising.
Well, it's been a pleasure to have you in the interview room as always, Danny. Congratulations on a brilliant drive to 4th place in the end. We look forward to seeing how you get on at Monza in a week's time. But until then, congratulations and thank you for being with us.
Thanks. See you next week.
All the best. So hearing there from our elite driver of Danny Lee, coming on home at P4 in class after starting at P14 in class, and we're going from 16th on the grid to 4th come the checker flag overall. An absolutely brilliant drive, all centred around a gamble on the rear wing, deciding to go with a car that was more slippery on the rear and going for the ultimate top end. Of course, qualifying, in his own words, a humbling experience given how close the field was and not expecting at any point to be that far back, as we do see the tap there of Sam Sherwood on the back of lead. But the key thing is, with regards to his performance, he never gave up and let the race come to him and gambled with the ring, and it really was a gamble that paid on off. And you can imagine now a good number of drivers maybe just trembling a little bit at the thought that Ferrari is definitely going to be as fast as lightning at Monza. Indeed, could it be a win for the Italian car on its home soil? Well, we'll have to wait and see just what he can pull off, but still a great result today. We'll then come on to our second interview of the day now, and it will be another elite driver, and it'll be none other than Ryan Moles. And we'll be hearing from the driver who took the win come the very finish. Well, as we get ready for him to join us, it's going to be interesting to hear his thoughts on the dynamic of the race today in terms of battling with his teammate, battling with the Sim Ampere, and also with Josh Fletcher. But as he does very briefly get ready to join us, we do have him jump into the interview room with us now. And in fact, we do have to ask him to come to us, as we do have some slight technical issues with the Discord, but he should join us any moment now, the ProTech Motorsport driver, but definitely a strong run from himself all the way through. And as he joins us now, Ryan, In the end, it came down to 6 thousandths versus your teammate. It was a cheeky run to the line, but the two of you for ProTech Motorsport kept all the fight into the very last lap, and you took the win by the smallest of margins in GT3 League UK Sim Racing history. You must be pleased as punch and also taking your overall maiden win of your history in the GT3 League.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm over the moon with it. The race from start to finish was just mega. It were really good, really close battles and stuff throughout. And then yeah, like you say, that run towards the end, I think he lifted towards at the line, but he said he didn't, but I believe he did.
Oh, indeed. It sounds like if you've ever watched the Fast and Furious movies at home, ladies and gentlemen, the debate, of course, in Fast and Furious 4 or 5, if I remember correctly, about did Dominic Toretto lift at the line. This does feel like a bit of a Paul Walker, Dominic Toretto moment between yourself, Ryan, and your teammate, Daniel. But going from movies to what felt like really racing and an action-packed move from start to finish, of course, it wasn't going to be easy at taking the win today, and we start with qualifying. P5 on the grid overall and in class. How was your qualifying session, given the fact that it looks so close up the top?
I messed up on one of my outlaps, so I was limited on time. Really, I had to make sure that I had to get the last four, like the laps in before the time ended. The first lap was a safe one. Lifted quite early into some of the corners. I just wanted to make sure I got a time on the board, as I felt like that was really important. And then throughout, I think my third lap was my best lap, I believe, or it might be my second. I can't really remember. But it didn't feel too bad. I felt like there was another 10 for 2 maybe to find, but yeah, given my previous qualifying runs, they've not been the best, so I was glad to get there on P5 and get so close to everyone else as well. I think that was the main thing.
Now, translating it over from qualifying, of course, qualifying well, but really, when you're in that mid-pack, qualifying doesn't mean as much when it's a long charge to turn number 1 and then having to find yourself in a group of drivers battling. We saw a relatively conservative approach from yourself, always staying behind your teammates at the start. Was that something that yourself and Daniel Thomas had agreed at the outset to really work together? Just take us through that dynamics. It looked as though whenever he tried to push, you were to push as well, and you broke away gradually from the likes of Martin Tillim.
Yeah, I don't think we actually agreed on it. I obviously, with him qualifying in front of me, and I know he's, as well as most people know, he's got really good pace, and so my idea was just to sit behind him and save as much fuel as possible and just work together essentially. But then towards the end, the fuel got a bit low, which I think we'll talk about soon after the pit stops and stuff. But yeah, it was something in my mind that I just wanted to work with him and try and just go long as possible, really.
Indeed, and by coming on to the strategy, and we'll speak specifically about it very shortly, but your group, we saw the top 6 before the pit stop, so running all the way from what was race leader at the time, Josh Fletcher, through to Sam Congreve, Joe Newman, Daniel Thomas, yourself, and also Martin Tillin. For so long, for 22 minutes, we saw the group of you holding firm together. Was it in your mind in terms of, do I push, do I wait, do I try and intervene, do I try and cut through, or do you feel to yourself, you know what, I've just got to run with this group and see what happens in the pit window?
Yeah, I think I wanted just to stick with that pack and just to stay where I was, because I was saving quite a bit of fuel doing that. And then when we pit, I think me and Dan both underfueled slightly. So when we came out of the pit stop and we were like P1 and 2, it was like, hold on a minute, what's going on? We shouldn't be here effectively. But then, so we decided to push a little bit just to try and get that 1 second distance so that the guys couldn't catch back up. But then we realized we might not have enough fuel, so we had to like try and work together then to get it over the line. We did get a bit fortunate as well towards the end with that incident that happened in turn 1. So that kind of gave us a little bit of a breathing space, but yeah, it was good.
Indeed, and by underfueling, of course, naturally having to fall back to that group. When you did start being caught up by the pack behind before the incident at turn number 1, was there any fault in terms of how you'd place yourself in that group? Were you wary of potentially falling behind, or were you thinking to yourself, you know, if I drop to P3, actually that's not a bad thing? Just take us through when you're in that situation where you haven't got enough fuel to potentially get to the end, unless you do a bit of fuel saving, what do you do?
like you say, if I know that when Sam was, I can't remember now. It might have been Joe Newman. I think he went up the inside of into turn 5. I think it was, or 4. So that kind of helped a little bit and then I could just lift and coast a lot more into the corners. Especially into turn 1, I was lifting most of the times just after the start finish line, so that made me save a lot of fuel. So that helped. But yeah, that I think that's the main thing to do really, is just to be patient with it. Because I know they were swapping positions a little bit early on as well, which caused a little bit of confusion from what to do. Like, do you go for the move? Do you not? Because I think if you're out front, you're burning a lot more fuel. So I don't think anyone really wanted to be first place that early on. So yeah.
Well, understandable, but in the end it was an instant at turn 1 for the drivers behind that really let yourself and your teammate run away. And then for the final few laps, we saw the two of you running nose to tail time and time again. What was going through your mind at that point in terms of wanting to try and sneak the win off of him?
I knew that I was going to get the run on him, so I think coming up onto the last lap, Dan said something. Dan said I could take it into turn 1 if I wanted, but I feel like he wanted to do what I did at the end, maybe just get me at the line. I didn't want to race him too hard because the last thing I wanted was to crash him out, because there was a few moments where I did get really close to him throughout the race, so that would have been a disaster. But I thought if I can stay with him, like, up until the bus stop, and I get a good run out of the bus stop, I know that I'll be able to pip him at the line. And luckily for me, I did slightly. So, yeah.
Oh, indeed, it was a brilliant moment right at the end, and of course your heart must have been pounding at that point and thinking, have I done it, have I not, to see it confirmed by 6,000. And just on that, have you had a chance to speak to Dan already and just get his thoughts on what he thinks about you jumping him to the line?
Yeah, we was in a voice call throughout the race, and when we crossed the line, we both just started laughing because it was just brilliant. But yeah, we're both very happy. P1, P2 for the team, maximum points. Obviously, my first win in the league as well, which I'm just absolutely delighted about, because I didn't think I was going to be that competitive this season. Going off last season, the Audi wasn't the best, but luckily now with the changes, it actually shows that I have got okay pace and I can compete with the likes of like Joe, Dan, and Damian Lobbett, which I know he didn't have a best race today, but yeah, it's nice to know now that I can crack on with this championship and be competitive.
Or indeed were, of course, the winner in the Audi in the race at Ritskogen back in Season 8, and now the winner in the Audi at Daytona in 9, but just not in class, but also overall. And looking ahead to Monza in a week's time, how are you feeling for the Italian Temple of Speed?
I'm not too sure yet, because Monza's a weird one. It's known for being chaos, really. A lot of dives expected into turn 1. And the tight twisted sections. It's not my favourite track. I wouldn't say it's the worst track I've got, but yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think there's hopefully a bit of teamwork again, but we'll see.
Well, indeed, and we look forward to seeing how you get on in Italy in a week's time. But just before we do let you go, Ryan, is there anybody you'd like to give a shout out to or say thank you to live on the broadcast this evening?
Yeah, the ProTech guys again. The strategy with Dan, just working with him, we're good. And the rest of the field, they were a good race. It looks good from what I saw back. So yeah, I look forward to going racing again next week.
Absolutely brilliant to hear, Ryan. Well, with that, thank you for joining us in the interview room. As always, congratulations on your maiden overall win in the series and a well-deserved win in class as well. And well, we look forward to seeing how the ProTech Audis can fly in Italy in a week's time.
Nice one. Thanks, Paul.
All the best. So hearing there from our overall winner today and in the elite class as well of Ryan Moulds from ProTech Motorsport, bringing on home a superb result after a challenging qualifying session which saw him qualify inside the top 5, albeit with being so close. It was always going to come down to what drivers could deliver going through and through over the course of the race distance. But in the end, ProTech Motorsport delivered the 1-2, and well, the two drivers of Ryan Moulds and Daniel Thomas working together, but it was Moulds that managed to just get his nose ahead at the most important moment when they got to the very line. But it'll be interesting to see how they work it out at Monza. Of course, a similar circuit in some regards with the amount of slipstream, but also some highly technical corners thrown into the mix. But now as we come on to our third interview for today, it is going to be none other than Edward Knight. Of course, Edward Knight being our Ignium Motorsport Spark Pro driver who took the class win. And well, very shortly we will have him join us, as we do just ask him to join us in the interview room now. And give us a brief moment, ladies and gentlemen. And as we do wait for our Ignium Motorsport Spark driver to join us in the interview room, we're getting his thoughts on what was a very dramatic end to the race where it could have gone either way in the class, having dropped off of the lead for a brief moment, only to then find the lead would come back to him at the very end. But as he joins me now, Edward, a fantastic end to your day at Daytona, bringing home the win in class ahead of your peers. But it wasn't going to be easy at the very end, with a mistake that almost cost you, and then only to see the result swing back your way, albeit perhaps a little bit of a bitter moment given the fact that your teammate Paul Smith could not be there on the podium with you.
Yeah, very bittersweet. It was, I think, the BMW actually saved me from fully spinning around, so I'd like to say thanks to that guy.
Oh, indeed. And John Eddowes there, we saw it on the broadcast when you did make a little bit of contact, and we observed the same thing, that perhaps that contact kept you pointing in the right direction. And we'll come on to that moment specifically shortly. But first, let's start with your qualifying session. We saw in qualifying that it was going to be very close overall, but in the end, it was an Ignium Motorsport and Ignium Motorsport Spark lockout in terms of the top 3. With yourself qualifying P2 in class just behind Smith, and Jaco Boshoff only a couple of attempts behind as well. You guys must have been very happy with how you hooked it up in qualifying.
Yeah, it was all down to the hard work of the team, getting everything together and making a wicked setup for the occasion.
In terms of your approach to qualifying, how did you find the ambient temperature, and also the fact that with those 4 laps available, did the car come to you quickly, or did it feel as though you needed all 4 of those laps to really deliver that final time?
I felt that by the end of on the 4th lap, I did feel like the tyres were gone and I was sliding in the corners. But altogether, the Lambo, it was great at Daytona. It felt really solid through every corner.
Oh, indeed. And with that in mind, of course, and delivering over the course of each qualifying lap and translating it into the race, the setup working out quite nicely as well. What was your approach to the race in terms of strategy? Did you think about potentially trying to make a breakaway with your teammate, Paul, or did you more think about, okay, you know what, just find out where I fit into the line on the opening laps and then take it from there?
At the start, yeah, it was going to be the 3 of us in a big train, Hakon at the front, then Paul, and then myself. But into turn 1, it was just everybody around the outside. It was just let the elites go. You know, I can save more fuel behind them, and I'll probably pop out in front of them.
And then as the race went on, of course, and things started to settle down, and we turned the race really towards strategy. We saw for so long yourself and your teammate running together, but also John Eddowes there constantly creeping into the fray. Did you guys try at any point to try and just outpace him and drop him before the pit stop?
Not before the pit stop, no. There was we were 2 bunched up in a group, and it was just to save the fuel as much as you can. Because obviously, I think Lambo was taking the most fuel at the pit stop out of any of the cars. So we had to keep it very fuel saving that first stint. But then the pace was there as well, so it didn't really matter. And then when we come out for the second after the pit stop, it was just push, push, push.
Oh, indeed. And with regards to that pit stop, did you come in about the time that you expected to? We saw there was this big dive to the pits for packs of cars, including yourself and Smith and a number of the elites around you. Or did you have to change the timing to line up with what others were doing?
I did expect to go 1 more lap, but crew chief said no, so we came in with everybody else. And I was actually glad that everybody did come in on that lap. Otherwise, I had nobody to play with for the rest of the race. But yeah, it was great.
Now we come on to perhaps the more emotional and dramatic part of the race, the second stint. And well, we saw you leading the trio of yourself, Smith and Eddowes for a considerable period of time. But then a brief moment at turn number 7 almost saw all your hard work undone.
Yeah, just me pushing the car too hard. The tyres I was feeling the tyres at that point, and I just pushed it far too hard, over-rotated the car. I sort of saved it, but then I got back on it and it went again, and then obviously had the contact with John. And luckily enough, I was clear to go and nobody rear-ended me.
And then with a bit of fortune there, some more fortune found its way to you on what was the penultimate lap, where it seemed as though both Eddowes and also Smith ended up in a bit of a separate pair of incidents, both at the bus stop chicane, however.
Yeah, I knew they were going too wide, and I just saw the smoke, and luckily I slowed down, and yeah, luckily we didn't get collected, the three elites in front of me. Yeah, we didn't get collected on that, but it looked like a racing incident to me, for sure.
And with it being a racing incident, of course, if any investigation is done, it will be done post the broadcast today. Leading all the way to the finish there, a bit of a bittersweet moment for yourself, but also I think a day for Ignium Motorsport as a whole to be proud of, because you guys really did look strong, particularly in the pro class.
Yeah, it was I find with the car and the team and the set this week, we really clicked as a whole team, so it was really good.
Well, that's absolutely brilliant to hear. And looking ahead, of course, to Monza in a week's time, the Italian Temple of Speed, how are you and the team feeling your fortunes are going to be there?
Hopefully good. We had some good races the first week at the start of this season, so hopefully we can carry that on at Monza again and carry this victory on. But I know we're all going to be tired, because obviously we're all going to be dead after Daytona 24.
Well, indeed, with the Daytona 24 Hours and then Monza as well, it's going to feel as though it's a bit of a slipstream fest weekend, and with it, a bit of an exhausting one. But still, we look forward to seeing you guys take to the circuit in a week's time. But just before we do let you go, is there anybody you'd like to give a shout out to or say thank you to live on the broadcast?
Yeah, I'd like to give a shout out to obviously the Ignium team, everybody there. They're a great team, great family. It's great racing with them. And also I'd like to give a shout out to John and say thank you for spinning me around at the end there. I've had a little chat with him. Everything's great, and hopefully me and him are going to have some great battles this season.
Well, it's definitely looking as though it's going to be a great rivalry between the two of you, and I'm sure he'll appreciate the words from yourself. But with that, Edward, thank you for joining me in the interview room. Congratulations once again on bringing home your opening win in terms of your account for Season 9 of the GT3 League, and we look forward to seeing how you get on at Monza in a week's time.
Thank you very much.
All the best. So hearing there from Edward Knight, our pro winner in the end for Ignium Motorsport Spark, in a brilliant drive from start to finish, albeit a very well measured drive, and not letting himself get ahead of step before going into that second stint. Flying high in the Lamborghini Huracan GT3 Evo, but it was a bittersweet way to end the race. We're almost going all horribly wrong at turn number 7, only to make contact with one of his rivals that kept him pointing in the right direction, and no real damage to John Eddowes' car by the looks of things. But then a two-wide moment for Paul Smith and John Eddowes that we didn't quite catch on camera. We only saw the aftermath, and the conclusion was that Knight would go on through to take the win. And well, of course, Ignium Motorsport will be pleased with what they achieved today, but they're looking to take it to the next level at Monza in a week's time. But having heard from our pro winner, we now come on to our final interviewee of the day, and that is Adrian Koukoulas, the AM driver there, the privateer, who had definitely a race to remember in terms it went one way and then the other. And as he gets ready to join us, he'll be interested to hear his thoughts on the whole scenario with Fresina, and also his qualifying that putting him on pole. And as he does join us now in the interview room, Adrian, a great result from yourself, start to finish, looking to be one of the fastest AM drivers here today in attendance at Daytona. You must be absolutely pleased to bring home your maiden win in this season.
Hi, Paul. Hi, all. Yeah, that was quite an interesting and intense race. It was super fast. I haven't been in a field that is that big and that aggressive, so my intent going into the race was to be as conservative as I can. just to maintain as many positions as I can, knowing full well that the amateur is still behind me.
Indeed, and in terms of breaking your race down today and the intensity of the field, let's start with qualifying. We saw you take pole position in the AM class and P23 overall, and in qualifying we saw across the field there were margins where we'd have at least 5, if not 10, if not 15 drivers separated by, say, half a second through to a whole second. With qualifying being so close, do you feel as though the lap time you delivered was truly representative of what you brought to the table? Of course, it was good enough for pole, but was that the perfect lap, or was there more out there in your opinion?
There was definitely more. I set a decent lap on the first lap, which would have put me in the bottom third of the field in the amateurs, knowing full well that there will still be a respectable time for my division. Lap two and lap 4 were off track, so I set my time on lap 3, and I took the bus stop a bit easier, so I gave up 3:10. So I was on a 44 lap before the bus stop, so it would have put me roughly in the top 10. All things remaining equal, but my intent was just to get it home. And my run into the finish line was slower than usual.
Oh, indeed. And now translating it into the race start as we watch it back right now in the background. Of course, battling with Eden Frazina and a number of pros around you, we did see a relatively conservative start from yourself, but I think priding safety more over trying to make ground early on.
Yeah, correct. This is my second season in iRacing, so I'm still getting used to sim racing as a whole. And this caliber of field, this size, Silverstone last week was my first real race at this level, and with this size and depth of field. Silverstone had no real experience, so lap 2 guys ahead of me, they lost it at Cop, so I had to pull on the brakes, and then I got rear-ended, which ended my race. But the intent for Silverstone was to for midfield. Unfortunately, I finished near the back. So going into Daytona, we're practicing for 24 hours, which has been my first endurance race. So there's been a lot of training, a lot of racing, which has then translated into a lot better race pace. In the first couple of laps, I got bumped around a fair bit. I gave a bit more room than expected, as you can see on the replay. But as I said before, for me, it was just about just being consistent in the first half of the race, knowing full well that's going to be super lit, especially with pros behind me, and they were trying to make up as many pieces as they can and not lose time. I got bumped drafted a couple of times leading into the bus stop. It happened to me before, so it was a bit scary, a bit prickly. But I did my best. That exit, as you can see on the screen, wasn't too hot, but again, just getting used to it. So yeah, it was wild first half.
Oh, indeed, and as we just see the pass that was made by Frazina on yourself into turn number 1, what was your approach after that being passed early on in the race? Did you think about, right, I need to go hunting after him, or just, I don't want to lose him, but I've still got pros who are trying to filter the way through the pack?
Now he had quite a good average pace, so he was I haven't looked at the data yet, but it looked like he was gapping, and then I think 2 laps after this, the blue Lambo, one of the Lambos ahead of us, he lost it in turn 1 going to turn 2, so me and the 3 guys behind had to cut 2 on the grass. Then gave a 4-second gap roughly to Frazina, so I knew after that, unless all of us 3 are going to work together, he was pretty home and hosed. So it wasn't expected the way he went out. He reappeared coming off the cages into our path, and we went straight through, and I think we all got X's off, definitely. And then I thought after that we had significant damage, but I don't know what iRacing did, but continued with no damage. We just got a 4X, and then it seemed that P3 and P4 at the time take down a DNF from it, so which is a shame.
Well, indeed, it was a shame to see it the way it did play out, but still, the loss of some was an opportunity for yourself to really come on through, and from that point onwards, it looked as though it was relatively straightforward. You had a lot of pace behind you, you also had some pros around you to potentially use a little bit of the draft off of. Did you stay with your standard strategy, or did you change up your strategy at any point?
So coming out of the pits, I made maybe a couple of seconds, 3 seconds, which is good. Maybe 10 laps to go, I cut the bus stop, so I got a slow down penalty, which then I lost the toe of the 2 guys ahead of me. So then in the last 5 to 7 laps, I was trying to aim for a 145, be as conservative as I can, knowing full well that the gentleman behind me, I think at least 10 to 15 seconds.
And played it very smart.
It was all about banking it, yeah.
Indeed, and banking it all the way to the finish from start to end of that second stint, and coming across the line, of course, picking up your maiden win in an AM class, which is absolutely packed with talent, yours included. And now we look ahead to round number 3 in a week's time at Monza, the Temple of Speed. How are you feeling for a circuit where the Porsche perhaps may be at a disadvantage given the straight line speed differentials of cars?
Yeah, from my experience in racing a week in Monza in the Porsche Cup, it can be pretty wild. So there could be a lot of variance with pace and expected results. I'm still learning the GT3 car, and especially with the oversteer and how you manage it, because with traction control on, it's very hard to control unless you opposite lock it when it gets a bit too wide. So I've been practicing without the traction control on, especially from Monza coming out of T1, where you can oversteer it a fair bit. And what I've seen, if you push the GT3 car a bit too hard and you do engage the traction control, you just spin. Unlike the Cup car, where you can modulate the accelerator and the brake to control it and power slide out. From my limited practicing at Monza in the GT3 is, if you overcook it, your butt is going around you. So I've been trying without traction control, just primarily for exiting T1. So I don't know. The Porsche doesn't have great top end. It does have good braking. In both horseshoes is where the Porsche makes up time. Here in Daytona, so I'm guessing both Lesmos, the Porsche will do fine. The straights, it'll struggle, and then in the braking points, it'll do okay. But again, depending how field is and wherever it is. So, and for me, again, it's all about being consistent and learning from it. So where I finish, it's higher up the field, the more the merrier.
Would definitely be interested to see how you get on, and I do like the way you're really portraying each race as a learning experience and breaking it down into the component parts, and therefore we can only imagine that your pace will continue to grow, and indeed your status in the AM group will continue to rise as we continue through the season. But with Monza in mind in a week's time, and just before we do let you go, Adrian, is there anybody you'd like to give a shout out to or a thank you to live on the broadcast this evening?
No one in particular is compared to the prior people on, because I am a pro here. It's just appreciate everyone in the field. It was a great race. It was very enjoyable. Learned immensely, and with yourselves as well, commentated. I was listening to in the background as we were racing. It seemed that the elite field was going off like a party. And this is my first time with UKSimRacing, so it's been very professionally organised leading into the season. Each week has been well communicated, well managed. Scrutineering before the races inside. So all in all, it's been great.
Well, Adrian, we really do appreciate having you on the grid with us, and we're glad to hear how much you're enjoying it from start to finish, week in, week out, and long may that continue. But with that, congratulations once again on your win in the AM class, and also your overall finish of P18 today, and we look forward to seeing how you get on in a week's time at Monza.
Appreciate it, and thank you all. Have a good day.
All the best. So hearing there from Adrian Koukoulas, the AM winner for today, the privateer. And in the background, we just saw the incident that Adrian was describing with regards to a number of drivers himself, including having to part the seas around what we believe was Edin Frazina's car, going horribly wrong through turns 2 and 3 as he makes his way down towards the bus stop chicane on the pictures right now. Really a reflection of what has been an educational race for himself in terms of learning little bits about the car and filling himself in within the field over the course of the racing today, and also getting to learn more and more about the Porsche, the GT3 car, as he charges around each and every circuit and taking those little tidbits of information round after round and applying them at the next round. And it's definitely going to be interesting to see with two very different winners in terms of cars and drivers in rounds 1 and 2. Of course, at Silverstone, it was one of our other drivers who really took to the top step and led the way, and that driver in particular was Aaron McGregor ahead of Darren Sharp. Was the two of them so close at the end, but neither of those drivers up there today, and instead Kukulis right up the top instead. And will we see a repeat winner in our next round, or will we see a new winner in the AM class entirely? That will be the change that confronts them all, and well, we look forward to that. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes all of our interviews for today, and you have heard from the 4 drivers of, firstly, Danny Lee in the 188 Privateer Ferrari in the Elite class. Our second interview was the number 18 Audi driver from ProTech Motorsport in the Elite class of Ryan Moles. Then our third driver was the 225 driver of Edward Knight in the Ignium Motorsport Spark. What was there? The Lamborghini Huracan GT3 Evo. And then last but not least, we just heard from the AM Privateer in the 917 Porsche 911 GT3 of Adrian Kukulis there. And well, congratulations to all of them and to all the drivers for their results today. But it is now time for us to take a look at the updated standings after 2 rounds of 8, subject of course to any stewards' inquiries from today. So we start off with the elite standings here, and we can see that with regards to the position of our drivers after 2 rounds, it is now Daniel Thomas who continues to lead by a growing margin there of what is 10 points over Daniel Lee. Albeit it is only 2 rounds in, but it does seem as though Daniel Thomas really starting to staple himself at the top and laying the foundations with regards to his championship campaign. And can he continue that run? Albeit with Ryan Moles now moving up into P3 for ProTech Motorsport, you would imagine the ProTech Motorsport pair would love to make it 1-2 in the championship, but I can imagine that Lee will be doing everything he can to be a thorn in their side, and particularly at the home soil for the Ferrari next time out, there is going to be expectation that the 488 will fly high. Joe Newman in P4 there on 24 points, just ahead of teammate Sam Congreve by 2 points of Simran Racing Red, with Infinite Black's Damian Lobbett having a difficult day today, but still a good result in round number 1, keeping him well in contention so far, with Josh Fletcher not in attendance last week, but bringing home a great result for P7 in the championship. And then Hakon Gustad, Martin Tillian and Nathan Foster completing the top 10. Best of the rest in P11, we have Joshua Pratt there on what is 6 points, albeit out of the top 10 based on result countback. And then Cy Anthony, Sam Sherwood, Sean Valendia and Alex Hill completing the top 15, with Matthew Crisp, Austin William Campbell, Ryan Davies, Dean Powell and Stephen Masters completing the run through to 20th. And then James Folks and Cameron Hawes, P21, P22. And if those of you out there who are wondering why have we got some red and negative numbers next to our drivers' scores for round number 1, that is an update on the score following post-round stewarding, whereby the post-round stewarding is being focused on what is essentially points being dropped off a driver's, for instance, rather than time being taken away from a driver's race, for the simple reason it is seen as a stronger deterrent, because you can imagine if a driver wins the race by a margin of 30 seconds but they only receive a 10-second penalty for an instant, they're still declared the winner and bring the full points home. So that is a change to the stewarding direction for this season of the GT3 League. We then come on to the pro class, and we can see here that at the top is Alex Gaines still, only by a single point, but he's jumped into position now after 2 rounds, with Peter Cox hot on his heels 1 point behind the UKSimRacing driver there, having a great result today. But it is Gaines' consistency, and again, we talked about this at the end of the race, but it is so very true. Gaines, despite struggles in qualifying, it would seem, finds a way to make his way inside that top 5 onto the podium, and I think if he can continue to do that, he's definitely in with a shout. But if he can qualify better, then he could be bringing home his maiden win next time out. Edward Knight moves up into P3 for Ignium Motorsport Spark there, with a great run today, really keeping him in good stead. And in terms of, we continue on down there, we can see that John Eddowes running in a comfortable P4 at the moment by 7 points over Nathan Scott, and we do have a top 5 that is now starting to break away from the rest of the field, albeit how long will it be before we potentially see some of the other drivers that close back on up? That'll be the change for them all, because we can see there with Nathan Scott in 22 points, he is 4 clear of Jeff Griffiths. In fact, my eyesight deceives me there. He is 6 clear of Jeff Griffiths, and therefore it will be for Nathan Scott the opportunity to really make it a top 5 focus on that championship as we go in towards the second half of the first 4 races of the season. Jeff Griffiths there, meanwhile, has the change of Chris Eddersford behind, with Paul Smith in P8, not too far off, and then Joel Amos and Martin Fernie completing the top 10, and then best the rest of the pros in P11, Daniel Merchant ahead of Colin Patterson, Jakob Boshoff, Tom Farr and Dion Wren, and then we have Stuart Brown, Ollie Pimley, Mark Collicott, David Larson and Darren Fellows completing the pro standings for the time being. Then we come onto the AM class standings here, and we can see that the complexion is a little bit different, with Darren Sharples leading the way by a growing margin, it would seem, of 12 points there. But for Sharples, the challenge will be on him to really maintain that momentum, given the fact that we do have such an intense field of our AM drivers. And, well, Mark Johnson holding on to P2 for now, but you can see that Daniel Pays, Adrian Kukulis, and also Matt Maddox and Aaron McGregor there. Well, from P2 through to P6, it is only 6 points, and all of those drivers at any moment could potentially shave off an advantage that Darren Sharples is able to carve out. Then we have Brock Freites in P7 ahead of Casper Brotner, with Michael Warrington not too far behind in P9, and Ben Watkinson completing at the overall top 10 with a good result today, returning the favour in terms of a difficult result last time out at Silverstone. Simon Hartley best the rest of the AMSA in P11 for Tiki SimSport Corpa, with his teammate Frank Klein there in P12, and what was not a day to be for the Tiki SimSport driver. And then Thomas Barjak, Ryan Gonzalez and Richard Curry completing the top 15, with AG Garcia, James Conley, Jack Bullen and Eden Frazina completing the top 19. And of course it is going to be a round to hurt for Frazina after being in control for so long, having it all go wrong right through the race, and therefore losing out on what looked to be an almost guaranteed win. Now coming on to the team standings, we do have here ProTech Motorsport taking the lead now with a margin of only 9 points over UKSimRacing after 2 rounds, and then Simam Racing at Red a little bit further back in P3. But the key point here is that ProTech Motorsport jumping into lead and having a slight margin at the moment. The focus will be on UKSimRacing to really try reel in the proficiency of ProTech Motorsport. And Simam Racing Red right now battling hard for that P3 ahead of Old Dudes in Cars, with Ignium Motorsport Spark making their way into the top 5 for the first time this season. Then Tiki SimSport Kimi, they're dropping a P6 on 32 points, with Simam Racing Blue not too far behind. And then Tiki SimSport, Ignium Motorsport and Tiki SimSport Copper completing at the top 10. Best the rest in P11, Symphona Esports Black ahead of BDM Racing, and it's Tiki SimSport Car Marte ahead of Symphona Esports White, Tiki SimSport Tower and ZOR, who complete the team standings after 2 rounds. But of course, remember, these results are provisional. They may be adjusted based on post-round shooting from round number 2. We'll have to wait to see, and we'll get an update on that, of course, following the end of the broadcast in round number 3. But those are the standings, and ladies and gentlemen, and now it is time for us to wrap up. Thank you very much for watching, and if you do want to know more about the UK sim racing community after today's broadcast, perhaps you want to be on the grid for a future season, or you just want to know how you can get involved and collaborate and communicate with the drivers and the organisers, well, firstly, you are welcome to check out our official website. That is the web address of uksimracing.co.uk, where you can find out all the latest information with regards to our affiliates, upcoming series, ongoing series, and everything in between. Alternatively, if you're not inclined to go to our website and you're more of a Twitter follower, you can always follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/UKSimRacing_. Also, a big thank you to our affiliates, and those affiliates once again are the combination of what is Swello Meta Sim Racing Coaching and their YouTube channel address there. And why should you listen to Swello Meta as a sim racing coach? Well, for the simple reason that Swello Meta has got a sim racing coaching course specifically for you, with a whole variety of approaches to coaching, but the fundamental thing focusing on those key 3 aspects which you need to improve upon in order to improve upon your racing approach, whether it be trying to find a 10th on a lap at a particular course, or a whole second on average in your racing time. Alternatively, changing up your approach to conserving the tyres on the car. Swello Meta has a course specifically for you, and being a multi-champion official iRacing series, including the Porsche Cup series in 2021, his word goes a long way in assisting you and coaching you in bringing your racing up to the next level. We also have their Race Anywhere, and at Race Anywhere, their web address raceanywhere.co.uk, is the provider of curated sim racing equipment, aiming to only stock products that represent excellent value for the sim racing community. We also have Demon Tweaks there, their web address demon-tweaks.com, the provider of the most complete and innovative motorsport product range available worldwide. So no matter what your level of discipline, Demon Tweaks could help drive you to realise your motorsport ambitions, whether they be on the simulator or in the real world. And then lastly, we do have Amazon. Amazon.co.uk is the company striving to be the Earth's most customer-centric company, the Earth's best employer, and the Earth's safest place to work through the provision of concepts pioneered by Amazon, including but not limited to Amazon Fire tablets, Amazon Web Services, and also Amazon Alexa. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, it is now time for us to pack up our bags and make our way from the United States back to the European continent. We're heading to Italy for round number 3, for on Sunday, the 22nd of January 2023, we'll be taking on the Italian Temple of Speed. It is the Monza Grand Prix circuit, and with all of our drivers, of course, practicing for the Daytona 24 Hours on iRacing, and then transitioning over to this race as well, it is going to be the ultimate test of stamina. It will be a circuit much like Daytona today, which will put a good emphasis on slipstream-based battling, but also there's going to be some very tricky medium and low-speed apex and a good number of chicanes, and with a triplet of chicanes that dominate the Italian circuit, who will stand tall among them all and bring on home the win in class? We will find out then, but until then, we've been UK Sim Racing. I've been your host and commentator, Paul TX141 Walsh, also known as Britain a Spit, depending on what media you follow me on. And until next time, remember to stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, but most importantly, remember to stay on track. Good night.